Have you ever wondered if there's another version of yourself out there, living a completely different life? This video explores unsettling clues about parallel universes, leaving you questioning your reality before drifting off to sleep. Let's start with Level 1. In a long, silent corridor, lined with mirrors on both sides, the reflections seem endless. Each pane catches the one before it, sending your image backward into a receding tunnel that appears to stretch beyond the limits of vision. The air feels still here, almost preserved, as though this place has existed untouched for centuries. Your footsteps do not echo. Instead, they dissolve into the muted expanse of glass and faint silver gleam. The reflections are precise, every angle, every movement repeated in miniature again and again, until, without warning, you notice one that is not quite synchronized. A single figure, far back in the sequence, blinks at a moment when you do not. The motion is subtle enough that you could doubt it happened at all. Yet the difference lingers, like a faint scratch in an otherwise flawless surface. In the history of mirror making, such corridors were not always symbols of infinity. In palaces of the 17th century, they were signs of wealth and technical mastery. Artisans would back sheets of glass with mercury, creating panels that shimmered even in low candlelight. Visitors would stroll through galleries of reflection, their images multiplied into a kind of living procession. In some cultures, mirrors were not purely decorative. They were portals of symbolism, believed to hold fragments of the soul or to connect the living to their ancestors. A glance too long could invite questions about which side of the glass was truly the real one. Today, the infinite hallway is as much a construct of mathematics as it is of architecture. The repeated reflections follow predictable rules, shrinking according to the distance and angle between mirrors. But this predictability also feeds a quiet unease. If the image is supposed to repeat exactly, then any change, no matter how small, suggests something else at work, perhaps a subtle shift in light, or perhaps something more. And as you continue forward, the reflections ahead grow smaller, quieter, and less certain, until they seem to watch you more than you watch them. In the quiet, unhurried act of looking into a mirror, there is a comfort in seeing the world reflect back exactly as it should. Every gesture, every blink, every breath is mirrored in perfect synchrony. But there are rare accounts, whispered more as curiosity than warning, of moments when that synchrony falters. A person leans closer, perhaps in the middle of washing their face or adjusting a collar, and notices something that makes the mind still. The reflection inhales a fraction too late, or exhales when they themselves are drawing breath in. At first, the brain searches for a rational foothold, the flicker of a light bulb, a delay in perception, an unnoticed shift in their own rhythm. Yet, the pause it creates lingers far longer than the moment itself. Breathing is one of the few unconscious patterns that humans share universally, a quiet pulse of life that doesn't ask to be noticed. And yet, when the mirror's version breaks from it, it feels like the violation of an unspoken contract. Theories emerge in both scientific and esoteric corners. Neurologists might speak of mismatched neural processing, where perception stumbles and lags behind the body's movement. Folklore scholars collect stories from rural villages where such moments were taken as signs, a shadow self drifting between worlds, or a visitor from a reality so close that its air is drawn in a different rhythm. In the 19th century, certain parlor games invited participants to stare at their reflections in dim lamplight, not for vanity, but to invite strange visual distortions. Records describe quiet gasps, when, for just an instant, the mirrored figure seemed to move with its own volition. Some even claimed that such experiences left them feeling as though they were being watched, not by another person, but by another version of themselves. Whether the cause lies in a trick of the senses, a quirk of the mind, or a leak between realities, the result is the same. An ordinary act, breathing, becomes unfamiliar, and the mirror becomes a question that no one is certain how to answer. A DNA test is supposed to be definitive, a quiet stamp of certainty in a world full of questions. Yet sometimes the result doesn't confirm what you know, It rewrites it. You receive a name, a shared sequence, and the statistical assurance that you are kin to someone whose face you have never seen. They live perhaps in another country, perhaps just a few streets away, yet their life has unfolded with an entirely different cast of relatives. And when you speak, their certainty mirrors yours. They remember grandparents you've never met, childhood stories set in houses you've never entered, family traditions that never touched your table. These mismatches sometimes have simple origins: adoption records not shared, affairs quietly erased from family conversations, or clerical mistakes buried in dusty archives. But other times, the details resist easy alignment. Dates of birth overlap in ways that shouldn't be possible. Old photographs reveal faces that resemble yours, but dressed in clothes belonging to another decade entirely. There are even cases in historical archives where two separate family lines appear to converge without explanation, their genealogies twisting into each other like two rivers that never met upstream. Cultural history offers its own strange parallels. In some rural communities, lineage was preserved through oral memory rather than written record, and stories could shift over generations until a stranger's ancestor was mistakenly folded into your own heritage. Modern genetic technology, precise yet impersonal, reopens these old uncertainties. The result is a quiet, unsettling question. If blood remembers something your mind does not, which of them is telling the truth? In the years before digital tuning and satellite forecasts, radio was a far less predictable companion. Frequencies drifted, atmospheric conditions bent and scattered signals in ways that engineers could not fully control. And sometimes, late at night, certain radios would produce voices no one could account for. They spoke in a cadence too deliberate to be static, in a language that matched no catalog of human speech. To those who listened closely, the words often carried the shape of a prediction. Tomorrow's weather, in startling detail, hours before any official bulletin could be issued. In rural towns, this became a quiet curiosity. Farmers, rising before dawn, would note the stranger's forecast and find it oddly precise. Rain at noon, a sudden chill after sunset, frost returning 2 weeks early. No station admitted to broadcasting it, and the accent, if it could be called that, belonged nowhere on Earth. Some thought it might be an artifact of shortwave propagation, signals bouncing in from far-off, unrecorded stations. Others wondered if it was something older, perhaps natural phenomena mistaken for speech, like wind across certain metal wires. Archivists of broadcast history have searched for transcripts, but the few tapes that survive are incomplete and unclear. A handful of researchers claim the words, "when slowed," contain references not only to weather, but to events, ship arrivals, train delays, even political resignations, all before they occurred. Such claims remain unproven, yet the persistence of the phenomenon is hard to dismiss. Today, most modern receivers filter out the stray edges of the spectrum. Yet there are collectors who still turn the dials slowly at night, seeking the low, measured voices. They say the signal is faint now, but on certain nights, between the hiss and the hum, the forecast still comes, for tomorrow, and perhaps for the days after that. You're sorting through an old box of photographs, yellowed edges, curled corners, when your fingers pause on one you've never seen before. It is labeled in a neat, familiar handwriting, "Your 5th birthday." In the image, a small child who is unquestionably you sits before a cake with 5 pale candles. The face is yours, the small half-smile yours, the way you tilt your head exactly as you always did. And yet, everything else is wrong. The shirt is striped in colors you never owned. The trousers have a stiff, formal cut you know your parents never bought. And the room, wood-paneled walls, an unfamiliar brass clock, windows showing a garden you've never walked in, belongs to no house you have ever visited. Family members deny knowledge of it. The handwriting on the back is indeed your mother's, but she insists she never wrote it. The photograph paper matches the era, aged as if it has been in that box for decades. There is no evidence of digital manipulation, no visible splicing or shadow mismatches. Even the light in the room falls naturally, the way sunlight drifts through curtains in the late afternoon. Such anomalies have surfaced before in personal archives, unplaceable photos with no verifiable origin. Some suggest psychological explanations, false memories crystallizing into conviction, dreams recalled as events. Others point to historical mix-ups, film rolls switched at processing labs, mislabeled prints inherited from distant relatives. And then there are the rarer theories, whispered in circles fascinated by the edges of reality, that such images might be fragments from nearby timelines where events unfolded almost, but not quite, the same. Perhaps in another version of your life, you wore those clothes, blew out those candles, and looked out upon that garden. And in some quiet crossing of worlds, the photograph slipped through, leaving you with proof of a birthday that, in this life, never happened. You pull open the narrow door, expecting the usual dim space lined with coats and the faint scent of fabric. Instead, for the briefest moment, the darkness parts to reveal an entirely different street. Not a photograph, not a trick of light, an open scene, as vivid and immediate as if the air of that place was already drifting into yours. The road is cobbled, slick with recent rain, and bordered by buildings whose windows glow with a warm, unfamiliar hue. A figure in a long coat moves along the edge of your sight, their stride steady, their gaze elsewhere. Then, before your mind can register the shape of the street or the sound of distant footsteps, it is gone. The familiar shadows of the closet return, the coats swaying faintly as though disturbed. Throughout history, such glimpses into other places have been woven into local legends. In some rural villages, stories spoke of cupboard doors that opened onto winter meadows, or cellar doors that, once in a decade, revealed ocean cliffs under foreign stars. The language used was often plain, almost practical, as if describing a stubborn latch or a creaking hinge, yet these accounts were quietly preserved. In older urban districts, narrow service alleys and back rooms were occasionally reported to connect for moments to entirely different cities, leading to rumors that certain doorways were mapped not on geography, but on time itself. Physics offers a more cautious vocabulary: refraction, optical illusion, the tricks of layered glass and light. Yet the unsettling clarity of such visions resists easy explanation. The mind plays with the possibility that the door did not just show another street, but briefly belonged to it. And while the latch in your hand feels solid and the air around you smells only of wood and dust, you are left with the quiet impression that somewhere, just beyond the frame, that street still exists, and perhaps its lone passerby now wonders why you vanished. In dreams, death often comes with a sudden jolt, falling from a height, being struck, drowning, and then, mercifully, the mind tears you free. You wake, heart steadying, reassured by the familiar contours of your room. Yet some accounts, sparse but unsettling, describe a second act to the nightmare. In these stories, the dreamer awakens not to relief, but to the faint hum of the television or the glow of a phone screen, only to find their own name scrolling across a news ticker. A headline reporting their death, somewhere else, some other time, details so precise they could not have been imagined. The mind searches for seams in the illusion. A mistaken identity, a prank, a cruel coincidence, but the facts, in the cases preserved, have a precision that feels uncomfortably sharp. Age, appearance, even fragments of the scene. In folklore, such events are tied to the idea of the double death, a belief that the soul does not depart cleanly, but can be pulled toward multiple endings, as if reality itself were uncertain about where or when you truly belong. Throughout history, there have been scattered records of dreams that seem to foreshadow death, though these often blurred into superstition. In ancient Rome, certain dream interpreters claimed that to die twice, once in the realm of sleep and once in waking life, was to exist on the threshold, a liminal state where the boundaries of the self could leak across time. Modern psychology offers softer explanations, The brain blending scraps of memory, overheard news, and stray fears into convincing illusions. But even these do not easily explain why, in a few rare instances, official archives contain reports that mirror the dream exactly. In such moments, waking life feels less like an escape and more like a continuation of something unfinished. A reminder that the dream may not have ended simply because your eyes are open. A newspaper carries the promise of a single, shared reality. Ink fixed on paper, events laid out in tidy columns, the same for every reader. But in your hands, the certainty bends. You pull open the fold and find not one front page, but two. Both bear the same date, the same masthead, even the same weather forecast in the corner. Yet the stories diverge completely. In one, the city celebrates a landmark opening. In the other, it mourns the site's sudden destruction. Photographs show the same streets, the same skyline. Only the scenes differ, as if the lens had looked into two versions of the day. At first, it might seem like a printing error. Newsrooms have been known to prepare multiple drafts when facts are uncertain, ready to release whichever proves correct. Sometimes early editions carry details that shift as information solidifies. But here, the differences are not in detail. They are in outcome. Names change, events contradict each other entirely, and yet every paragraph reads with the same confident authority of recorded fact. Archives hold a few peculiar precedents. In 1914, a small-town paper accidentally ran an obituary for a man who was still alive. In another edition, printed hours later, the headline celebrated his recovery. Both editions survive in collections today, each with its own internal logic. But your two versions for the same date seem to go further. They leave no trace of uncertainty, only the possibility that both realities unfolded and you happened to be holding the evidence in your hands. If the written record itself can fracture, what else in our history might exist in parallel, silently coexisting, waiting to be unfolded? In some towns, there are stories of strangers who seem to step out from between the folds of ordinary life. You meet them in a market, a train carriage, a narrow side street. They greet you by name without hesitation, their tone as warm and familiar as a relative's. Then, without prompting, they recall moments from your life in exquisite detail. The smell of a bookshop you've never entered. The rain-soaked afternoon when you missed a bus you're certain you never took. The argument in a kitchen you've never stood in. They speak as though these events were shared, as though you and they inhabited the same afternoon, the same street corner, the same flicker of time. Yet for you, there is no recognition. The places they describe may exist. The people they mention may live only a few streets away, but in your memory, those days never happened. Such encounters have been recorded for centuries, often described in personal diaries or tucked into the margins of letters. In some accounts, the stranger departs quickly, leaving the listener unsettled but oddly certain that the conversation was important. In others, the meeting lingers, the stranger insisting on more and more details until the listener begins to question their own recollections. Explanations vary. Psychologists suggest misidentification or the blending of separate memories, where a face and a name meet by chance. Folklorists point to older traditions of doubles, figures who walk the same paths as you, but in a life slightly offset from your own. And a smaller, quieter group speculates about intersections between timelines, where two versions of you have shared moments, only one of which you remember. Whatever the cause, the memory they offer stays with you, not because it happened, but because they believe it did, and that belief seems to leave a trace, as if you have borrowed a memory from a life you never lived. You step onto the train, expecting nothing unusual, just the familiar sequence of stations, the hum of conversations, the muted rhythm of wheels against track. At first, the ride is exactly as it should be. The suburbs pass in their usual order, painted shopfronts, telephone poles, fields that ripple in the wind. But then, without warning, the light changes. It is not the warm gold of late afternoon or the pale gray of an overcast day, but something stranger, a green tint, faint at first, then deepening until the whole sky outside is washed in it. The buildings seem taller, but not by floors, by proportions. Their windows stretched like the faces of people caught in an endless yawn. Shadows lean unnaturally far from their sources, reaching across streets and over rooftops. Trees you thought you knew now have leaves shaped like knives, swaying in a wind you cannot hear. Inside the carriage, nothing changes. Passengers remain absorbed in books, phones, or the steady blankness of the ride. No one seems to notice the transformation beyond the glass. The train does not slow, does not stop. Stations pass without names you recognize. Some are empty platforms choked with weeds. Others hold still figures, statues perhaps, though you can't be certain. Then, as seamlessly as it began, the world outside shifts back. The colors normalize, the buildings shrink to their remembered dimensions, and the station signs once again bear the names you know. You step off at your destination, but find yourself checking the clock, the ticket, the faces around you, searching for some proof that the journey was uninterrupted. In railway history, there are scattered accounts of similar experiences, stretches of track where time, color, and form behave unpredictably. Some dismiss them as tricks of light or the mind's way of passing monotony. Others wonder if, in those fleeting moments, the train's path brushed against a place where the familiar world was not quite the same, and then, just as quietly, let it go. One morning you notice it, a faint line along your skin, pale and smooth, as if it has been there for years. The shape is deliberate, almost surgical, but your memory offers nothing. No accident, no fall, no surgery to account for it. You trace it with your fingertips, feeling the way the skin dips slightly, the way the body has already done the quiet work of repair. It is not fresh, yet it is new to you. The rest of the day passes without answer, though the thought returns in idle moments, on the bus, at the sink, before sleep. The scar remains, and its absence in your memory feels heavier than its presence on your skin. Across cultures, scars have carried meanings beyond injury. In some traditions, they marked rites of passage or survival. In others, they were read as divine signs, maps of fate etched into the body. There are recorded instances in early medical journals of people discovering marks with no remembered cause, dismissed as unnoticed childhood injuries, though the exactness of the healing suggested otherwise. Folklore in certain mountain communities went further. A scar could be the echo of another life, the healed remnant of a wound from a path you did not survive. In the language of possibility, this idea brushes against theories of parallel lives, where each choice divides into another world, and not all endings are kind. A scar here might be a quiet inheritance from elsewhere, a trace of harm endured by a version of you that never reached this morning. Science might call it coincidence, the random result of unnoticed injury and the body's efficiency in repairing itself. Yet as your hand rests over it, you can't help but feel a faint gravity, as though some part of you remembers what the mind cannot. The skin has no pain left to hold, but perhaps the life it came from does. It begins with a casual click, a search through folders for something entirely unrelated. Yet there it is, a file with a name you don't remember choosing, created on a date that holds no significance. You open it expecting an error, maybe an old note you forgot to delete. Instead, you find page after page of plans written in your own style, with turns of phrase and quirks of punctuation that are unmistakably yours. They outline the next decade of your life in careful detail. Jobs you've never applied for, cities you've never visited, relationships you've never had. Some entries describe events so specific, addresses, dates, weather, that they feel less like intentions and more like memories waiting to happen. The first instinct is to retrace the steps. Check the document history, search the hard drive for signs of tampering, compare the metadata to other files. All of it matches perfectly, as if you had indeed sat down and typed every word. Forensic handwriting analysis might tell you that the stroke patterns are yours, that no forgery is present. And yet, you know you never wrote it. Historians of the strange point to earlier, analog versions of this phenomenon, diaries discovered in attics, filled with future entries in the owner's hand, ink faded as though written years before the events occurred. In some folklore traditions, such writings were believed to be gifts or traps from a shadow self, a counterpart who lives the life you didn't choose. In modern settings, the explanations range from hacking pranks to psychological dissociation, but neither quite accounts for the moments when the document predicts something, and it happens exactly as written. You could delete it, erase every trace, but the file lingers in memory, and with it, the uneasy knowledge that someone, or something, knows where you are going and has already written it down. The moon has always been a constant companion. Its face, though scarred and ancient, as familiar as an old friend's. For centuries, sailors, poets, and astronomers have trusted in the stability of its markings, the dark seas of basalt, the bright splashes of impact craters, the same orientation night after night. Yet tonight, when your gaze finds it, something is wrong. The patterns are shifted. Craters you have known since childhood have moved, their positions altered as though rearranged by unseen hands. A dark basin now lies where there should be bright highlands. Whole features seem missing, replaced by others you cannot name. Astronomically, the moon does rotate, but it is tidally locked, showing Earth only one face. Slight oscillations, known as librations, allow us to glimpse its edges, but never to see it wholly changed. This has been true for as long as human eyes have studied the night. Historical lunar maps, from Galileo's careful sketches to modern satellite composites, confirm this unyielding geometry. And yet, rare accounts in folklore whisper of a borrowed moon, a celestial impostor that appears in the wrong phase or with a strange, unfamiliar face. Some ancient calendars marked such sightings as omens, moments when the veil between skies was thin and another moon, perhaps from another world, briefly took the place of our own. Science offers no record of such an exchange, but the sight stays with you, unsettling in its quiet defiance. If even the moon can change its face, what else might shift without warning, leaving you to wonder which version of the sky is truly yours? It often begins with an idle moment, sorting through an old box, scrolling through a digital archive, or flipping through a photo album you've seen many times before. The image is there, exactly as you recall, the day at the beach, the picnic under the shade of a leaning oak, the crowded street of a city you visited years ago. Every detail matches your memory. The tilt of the sun, the pattern of your mother's dress, the expression on your father's face. But where you remember standing, smiling, perhaps holding something in your hands, there is only empty space. The absence is not subtle. The group is arranged around where you should be, their eyes still directed toward the gap, their postures angled as if including you. Yet no part of you remains. Not a hand at the edge of the frame, not a shadow, not the faintest blur. The image has simply been composed without you. And still, you remember the moment in full, the warmth of the day, the words spoken, the shutter's sound. Photographic anomalies are not new. Historians have documented cases where figures vanish from prints due to exposure errors, chemical flaws, or even deliberate retouching. Yet the stranger cases involve multiple copies, negatives, slides, and digital backups, all identical, all missing the same person. In some reports, relatives insist they remember you being there, but when shown the photograph, their certainty begins to waver, as though the picture is quietly reshaping their memory. Theories range from misfiled images to more unusual ideas, that the photograph reflects not only a moment, but the version of the world in which it was preserved. If that version no longer contains you, neither does the picture. Over time, you may stop showing the image to others, but each time you see it, you still feel the phantom presence of yourself standing in that space, smiling for a camera that, for reasons no one can explain, refused to keep you. It happens so quickly you almost miss it. You draw breath, ready to ask a question, perhaps something mundane, something you've never voiced aloud, and the person across from you speaks, not just answering in the general sense, but reciting your exact words, before you've even formed them. The same phrasing, the same pauses, even the same faint emphasis you would have chosen. It is as though they are recalling a memory, not anticipating a thought. For a moment, you consider coincidence. People often guess at what's coming in a conversation, finishing a sentence, supplying the obvious next idea. But this is different. The answer fits too perfectly, matching not only the subject, but the private cadence of how you would have said it. There is no hesitation, no sense of invention, just the quiet certainty of someone retrieving something already known. Instances like this are hard to document, yet they appear in personal accounts across cultures and centuries. Some frame it as intuition sharpened to an uncanny degree, the mind reading subtle cues long before words emerge. Others point toward shared mental pathways built over years of familiarity, where two people begin to speak from a common store of thought. And then there are stranger explanations. A conversation already had somewhere else, or perhaps somewhen else, bleeding into the present moment. In this view, what you experienced was not foresight, but recall. A brief overlap between parallel strands of time, where an exchange took place, concluded, and then replayed here with all the inevitability of memory. When the moment passes, you may still ask your question, just to feel the words leave your mouth. Yet as they do, it is hard not to notice that the answer, still hanging in the air between you, was already given, long before you arrived at it. The package is waiting on your doorstep, plain brown paper folded neatly around its edges, your name and address written in careful, unfamiliar handwriting. There is no return label. The weight is uneven, the way it shifts inside suggesting more than one object. You bring it in, set it on the table, and cut the string. Inside are things that belong to you, or should, but do not. A worn leather wallet with your initials pressed into the corner, though you have never owned one like it. A photograph of you standing in front of a building that does not exist here. Your smile caught mid-conversation with someone whose face is turned away. And at the bottom, the crumpled wrapping from within, its newspaper print dense with stories you do not recognize, each dated decades ahead of today. History keeps its share of misplaced and impossible deliveries. In archives, there are documented instances of letters arriving years after they were sent, carried across oceans, by ships that sank, or by postal routes that collapsed and reformed. Yet a handful of accounts defy such explanations, items bearing dates beyond the present, or containing events no record yet holds. Folklore often reframed these as gifts from the other side of time, warnings or assurances from lives not yet lived. The rational mind searches for forgery, for the small, deliberate hand of a hoax. Still, the arrangement of these objects feels uncomfortably precise, each one familiar enough to fit into your life, each one belonging to a story you cannot remember living. You place them back in the box, but the paper at the bottom keeps catching your eye, its ink set in headlines about events that have not yet happened. And though the seal on the package is now broken, the quiet thought remains. Perhaps it has not yet finished its journey. It starts as nothing more than a minor frustration, a turn taken too soon, a street that looks familiar, the quiet relief of recognizing the route home. But after a few minutes, the same row of houses appears again, the same tilted mailbox, the same leaning tree. Only the details are wrong. A blue car parked where a white one should be. Curtains drawn when they were open before. Faces at windows you don't remember passing. You keep driving, certain the loop will break if you just push a little farther. Yet every time you round the corner, the street returns, each pass bringing a subtle shift. The air feels heavier or thinner. A scent, rain on asphalt, baking bread, appears where it wasn't moments before. In some versions, the people you see don't look back at you. In others they do, and their eyes linger too long. Stories like this surface rarely, often buried in late-night radio calls or obscure forums. Folklorists liken them to the endless road tales told by travelers in rural areas, a warning that the path home can fold in on itself, trapping the unwary between places. Psychologists might point to spatial disorientation or temporal lags in perception, the brain scrambling a sequence of familiar sights. But there are accounts that resist such explanations. Cases where passengers in the same car recall entirely different details from each pass, or where the loop ends suddenly, depositing the driver miles from where they should be, with no memory of how they got there. In every version, the return to normal feels muted, as if the real streets are now only one variation among many, and the wrong road is still out there, waiting for you to take the turn again. For as long as we have mapped the heavens, the stars have offered a sense of permanence. Constellations drawn by Greek scholars, catalogued by Chinese court astronomers, and plotted with modern telescopes have remained fixed in their patterns for millennia. Yet one night, deep sky surveys reveal something unexpected, a formation of stars that does not appear in any contemporary chart. The pattern is intricate, almost deliberate. Its lines and angles echo descriptions found only in ancient myth, a constellation thought to be purely symbolic. Historical records from Babylonian tablets to Polynesian navigation chants speak of stellar shapes now lost to modern skies. Some were forgotten as their stars dimmed beyond naked eye visibility. Others were likely poetic inventions, storytelling constellations meant to guide seasonal rituals rather than literal positions of light. But this rediscovered shape is different. It is not faint nor obscured. It blazes clear against the darkness, as if it had always been there and somehow escaped every lens and chart until now. Astronomers search for mundane explanations, perhaps an overlooked cluster, a projection of unrelated stars that happen to align from Earth's perspective. Yet precise measurements show that several of these points are far too close together to be random. More curiously, their arrangement matches mythological diagrams with near-perfect precision, down to the placement of a heart star described in stories thousands of years old. In the absence of an answer, the sky offers only its silence. If a constellation can vanish for centuries and return, unchanged, then perhaps the stars are not as timeless as we believe, only patient. It appears quietly at first, a mention in a late-night radio segment, a fleeting reference in a film magazine, a grainy clip uploaded without context. The actor's name is unmistakable, the stills clearly from the late stage of their career. Yet the title is unfamiliar, and the plot, as described, does not match any film you know they made. Curious viewers search for it in official archives, streaming services, and fan-maintained databases, but the film is absent everywhere that matters. Despite this, reviews exist, some decades old, others newly published, all describing the same work in remarkable detail. Critics speak of a haunting performance, of scenes so carefully lit that they seem painted, of a final shot that lingers in the mind for days. There are disagreements about the ending, but not about the actor's presence. They are in it, and their portrayal is unforgettable. When asked, the actor offers no clear answer. In some interviews, they deny the film entirely, suggesting it may be a confusion with another project. In others, they pause too long before replying, then change the subject. A few collectors claim to have seen it at obscure film festivals or during unannounced screenings, but no verified copies ever surface. Historians of cinema note that the phenomenon echoes the lost film problem, where entire works vanish due to neglect or decay. Yet this case is stranger. Here, there is no production record, no shooting schedule, no crew lists, no surviving script pages, only recollections, always vivid, always consistent, existing without the material proof that such a film could have been made. Over time, the reviews themselves become the artifact, a portrait of a film that, for all practical purposes, never existed. And yet, if you read enough of them, a curious thing happens. The story begins to take shape in your mind, as though the film is building itself from the memory of people who swear they saw it. It begins as a small peculiarity, easy to dismiss. A door in your house, one you've walked through countless times, opens not to its usual hallway, but to a room arranged in a way you don't remember. The furniture is unfamiliar, though worn as if it's been there for years. The window frames a view that should be impossible from this part of the house. You close the door, open it again, and everything is as it should be. But it doesn't stop. Days later, the same door opens to a narrow corridor with faded wallpaper and the smell of varnished wood. Another time, to a kitchen with unfamiliar appliances humming softly, their design decades out of place. Once, you find a spiral staircase curling down into darkness that vanishes the moment you look away. Architectural anomalies have long occupied a curious space in folklore and urban legend. Homes where rooms appear and vanish, corridors stretch too far, or familiar spaces open onto unfamiliar landscapes. Some attribute it to the mind's capacity for misremembering layouts, especially in houses lived in for many years. Others suggest more material explanations, renovations half forgotten, dreams overlapping with waking perception. Then there is the more unsettling notion that the house is not fixed in a single reality. Each time the door swings open, it may be aligning itself to a different set of blueprints drawn in some parallel version of existence. In one, the kitchen stands where your study should be. In another, there's no second floor at all. Your house remains the same in name and foundation, but its internal map shifts according to rules you cannot see. Eventually, you stop opening that door casually. The act becomes deliberate, almost ceremonial, as though you're aware that each turn of the knob might reveal not just a different room, but a different world, one that was never meant to be part of your own. The song appears almost simultaneously, one recording uploaded from a small studio in Buenos Aires, the other performed live in a quiet bar in Helsinki. Different voices, different instruments, but the same melody, the same lyrics, even the same pauses between lines. Not merely similar, identical, down to the rhythm of the closing chord. Neither musician has met the other, nor have they heard each other's work. Yet when the recordings are placed side by side, they align as though drawn from the same source. Throughout history, coincidences in art have surfaced often enough to leave behind a scattered paper trail. In the late 19th century, composers occasionally published pieces that resembled works written continents away, the timeline suggesting no possible contact. Early ethnographers noted songs from distant cultures sharing entire melodic structures, their words carrying different meanings but sung in nearly the same rise and fall. Some ascribe these patterns to universal human tendencies, a kind of convergent evolution in sound. Others quietly wondered if ideas could drift in ways science has yet to map, slipping between minds the way weather crosses borders. In the present, copyright law offers little space for mystery, preferring to settle disputes with the language of influence and access. Yet there are moments like this, when the explanations feel thinner than the occurrence itself. Both musicians swear the song came to them whole, melody and words arriving as if remembered rather than composed. Perhaps it is coincidence, perhaps a trick of the subconscious, or perhaps the song does not belong to either of them, but to a place between, where melodies exist before anyone writes them down, waiting for more than one set of hands to bring them into the air. It begins as a small flicker of doubt while walking or driving through streets you know well. A road sign catches your eye, not for its color or design, but for the destination it names. You know every district, every landmark within miles, yet here is a sign pointing toward Northfield Haven or Old Water Docks, places no map has ever held. The arrows are crisp, the lettering perfectly in line with the city's style, as if they had always been there. Some people follow them out of curiosity. The stories that return are inconsistent. A winding detour that leads back to the same street, a narrow lane ending in an empty field, a stretch of road that seems to lengthen, the air turning cooler until the traveler decides to turn back. By morning, the signs are gone, replaced by the ordinary names you've known your whole life. Urban historians note that signage changes often, yet they rarely appear overnight without record. Maintenance logs, transportation department archives, none mention the altered names. In folklore, this mirrors older tales of phantom markers, said to guide travelers into the realm of spirits, where time passes differently and return is uncertain. Modern theories reach for psychological glitches, false memory, inattentional blindness, even the brain briefly substituting imagined words for real ones. Still, there are patterns in the accounts that are harder to ignore. Clusters of sightings on the same nights, people in different neighborhoods describing the same non-existent place. And in a few rare cases, an unsettling detail, those who followed the signs claim that, just before they turned back, they passed another sign pointing home, but the name of their own city looked subtly wrong. Memory feels like the most personal proof of reality, private, vivid, and anchored in the self. You can picture it perfectly, the soft weight of the animal in your lap, the sound of its paws on the floor, the way its eyes followed you from room to room. You remember its name, its scent, the exact corner of the yard where you buried it on a rainy afternoon. And yet, when you share this with your family, they insist it never happened. Not only do they deny the pet's existence, there are no photographs, no records, no neighbors who recall it. Psychologists might suggest a confabulation, a false memory woven from fragments of real experiences, perhaps a neighbor's dog, a story you once heard, or a photograph seen in passing. The mind can be a subtle forger, stitching these elements into something seamless, a memory that feels as solid as the floor beneath your feet. Such distortions have been documented in controlled experiments where suggestion alone has led participants to remember events that never took place. But some cases resist neat explanation. People describe memories so detailed they include smells, specific textures, even the shifting colors of an animal's fur in sunlight, details that cannot be pulled from suggestion alone. Across cultures, there are folk beliefs about inherited memories, moments from the lives of ancestors passed down like invisible heirlooms. Others speak of overlapping timelines, where fragments from a life not your own spill into your own recollection. Whether a trick of the mind or something stranger, the memory remains. And in its persistence, it quietly asks, if your senses can be certain, but wrong, what else in your past might be built from things that never were? You find it tucked between brittle newspapers and a stack of unused stationery, the paper yellowed but intact. The ink is deep and deliberate, the kind that bleeds slightly into the fibers, suggesting careful human hands. At first glance, it is an ordinary map. Familiar continents, oceans, and compass roses curling in decorative flourishes. But as your eyes move along the edges of coastlines, something is wrong. Islands crowd waters where none should exist. A narrow strait cuts a landmass you know as solid. Borders run in strange angles, enclosing countries you have never heard of, their names rendered in calligraphy that feels both foreign and oddly familiar. Rivers flow in impossible directions, linking seas that lie thousands of miles apart in modern geography. Cartographers have long warned that old maps can mislead. Early explorers worked from rumor and guesswork as much as observation, and political changes often redrew the world. But this map resists explanation. The style suggests it was made in the last century, not in the age of speculation. More unsettling still, you are certain the layout was different the last time you looked. Some collectors speak of living maps, artifacts that shift with each viewing. One historian claimed that his copy of a naval chart slowly replaced the names of ports with ones from obscure maritime folklore. Others tell of maps that add coastlines overnight, their shapes uncannily precise until satellites confirm nothing is there. You might tell yourself the memory is faulty, that your mind is filling gaps with invention. But the next time you climb to the attic, the borders have changed again. A peninsula has become an island. A forgotten republic now claims an entire region. The world on paper is drifting, piece by piece, into a geography that belongs to no history you know, yet feels uncomfortably close to the one you live in. It appears in your call history without fanfare, just a name you haven't seen in years. A name you know should be impossible. You hesitate, telling yourself it's a glitch, a recycled number, a trick of stored contacts. But the timestamp is current, and when you press play on the voicemail, the voice is unmistakable. It's them. Not a recording you remember, not a fragment of the past, but words shaped in the exact way they used to speak, tone, rhythm, and those small inflections you'd forgotten until this moment. They talk about things you cannot yet verify, weather that hasn't arrived, a conversation you haven't had, an accident that, if their words are true, will happen tomorrow afternoon. Such accounts are rare, but they surface from time to time, whispered in late-night radio interviews or buried in forum threads. Some have technical explanations. Network errors resurrecting old data packets, numbers reassigned to strangers whose voices echo the familiar. Others point to deliberate hoaxes, or the mind's tendency to hear what it expects, bending the memory of a voice to fit the pattern it longs or fears to find. Yet there remains a quieter, more unnerving interpretation, that the call is not a message from the past, but from elsewhere. Perhaps, in some configuration of reality, your friend never died, and in a moment of strange alignment, their call slipped across to you. If so, the knowledge they share is not prophecy, but simple recollection, facts already lived on their side of the divide. When tomorrow comes, you watch for the details. Some may pass unnoticed, others may match too precisely. And whether or not their prediction proves true, the knowledge that your phone once rang with the voice of the dead lingers, as steady and inexplicable as the call log that refuses to vanish. You take the book from the shelf, its cover exactly as you remember, the familiar title embossed in faded lettering, the spine creased from past readings. It opens easily in your hands, the pages carrying the same faint scent of old paper. But within a few lines, you notice something wrong. The sentences do not match the story you recall. Characters you knew are gone, replaced by others who speak in unfamiliar voices. Entire scenes are missing, and in their place are passages you have never read, descriptions of landscapes you've never imagined, events that pull the plot toward a completely different end. Turning the pages faster does not help. The book insists on this new version, every chapter following a path that should not exist. In literature, altered editions are nothing new. Authors revise, publishers reprint with changes, translations shift meaning. Yet those changes leave a trace, a new printing date, a preface, a change in design. Here, nothing has shifted on the outside. The copy in your hands is the same one you purchased, the same dog-eared corner from years ago. Only the story itself has moved, as if it has quietly rewritten itself while sitting on your shelf. Folklore in some regions speaks of living books, volumes said to rearrange their words depending on who reads them or when. In certain archives, there are whispered accounts of novels found to contain entirely different narratives on separate readings, the ink seeming to obey some logic not visible to the eye. The rational explanation leans toward memory, misremembered details, forgotten scenes. Yet the sharp clarity of the story you recall makes the change feel deliberate. And when you close the book, the quiet thought follows. If the words can change once, who is to say they will not again, and leave you wondering which story was ever truly yours? It's the sort of thing you notice only in passing. A familiar chair, one you've owned for years, sitting quietly where it doesn't belong. You could swear it was in the living room last night, but now it's in the study, angled toward the window as if it had been there for months. No scrape marks on the floor. No one in the house who could have moved it without you knowing. You push it back to where it should be, thinking little of it. Yet a few days later, it happens again. This time, it's in the hallway, or facing a different direction entirely. Over time, the moments grow stranger, finding a throw blanket neatly folded on its arm when you've never kept one there, or noticing a faint smell of dust and varnish, as if it's been stored away somewhere else for years before appearing again. Accounts of such shifts appear in small corners of folklore, often tied to the idea of wandering objects, possessions said to follow patterns or purposes invisible to their owners. In older traditions, a chair found in the wrong room might be seen as an omen, positioned to face a door where news will arrive, or turned away to ward off an unseen presence. Psychology offers subtler explanations: lapses in memory, unnoticed actions during fatigue, or the mind's habit of smoothing over inconsistencies until one stands out. Yet some reports defy these quiet rationalizations. People speak of checking security cameras, only to find the chair absent from both rooms for a stretch of time, as if it had been somewhere else entirely. When it returns, it's always without fanfare, waiting in a new place, an object from your own life behaving as though it has a life of its own. Fog has a way of softening the world, blurring edges until even the familiar feels distant. On certain mornings, it gathers thick in the streets and fields, hanging low, muffling every sound. And in that pale curtain, you notice shapes, human silhouettes standing still, their outlines faint yet distinct. They face you, unmoving, as though waiting. There is no sound of footsteps, no shift of weight, no breath disturbed in the air, just stillness, held in place. When the fog begins to thin, the shapes dissolve, breaking apart like mist around a tree. In their place, there is nothing, only empty space where they had stood. The mind quickly looks for reasons, perhaps shadows from trees, refracted light from street lamps, or the way fog magnifies the faintest shapes until they seem human. Meteorologists have recorded rare optical effects in fog, reflections and shadows cast on suspended droplets, sometimes producing the eerie impression of figures at a distance. And yet, folklore in many regions speaks of watchers in the mist, spirits, omens, or echoes of travelers caught between worlds. Old sea legends tell of sailors who saw crews standing silently on the surface of the water, only to vanish with the lifting haze. In rural valleys, stories warn of lingering too long when the fog looks back. By the time the sun burns through, the road is empty, the moment unprovable. But you remember the stillness, the quiet alignment of shapes that seemed too deliberate to be chance, and you wonder if the fog only hides the world, or sometimes reveals what isn't meant to be seen. It begins as an ordinary gesture, a late walk, a narrow alley, the quiet satisfaction of a beam cutting through the dark. But when the flashlight's circle falls on the far end of the passage, the familiar shadows are gone. In their place stand objects that should not yet exist: sleek cars with unrecognizable emblems, shop signs in fonts and languages you have never seen, people wearing clothes that seem part fabric, part light. They move naturally, unaware of your presence, as though your beam is not illuminating them but simply peering into the space they already occupy. You blink, tilt the light away, then back again. The alley returns to its current form: damp bricks, bins, and weeds, until the beam lands in just the right angle and the future reappears. Accounts of such moments are rare, but curiously consistent. Security guards patrolling abandoned districts, night workers crossing service lanes, children playing with torches in old neighborhoods, all describe glimpses of a time that has not yet come. Sometimes the changes are small: a newly built wall, a street lamp where there is none. Other times they are immense: an entire skyline shifted, trees replaced by glass towers, faces replaced by strangers who have not yet been born. Physicists dismiss such claims as tricks of perception, reflections, refractions, or a mind primed by darkness to misinterpret fleeting shapes. Folklore scholars note older parallels, in which lantern light was said to reveal spirits or show what will be in the turning of the year. Yet for those who have seen it, the experience leaves a lingering unease. If light can momentarily pierce the fabric of time, then darkness is not merely the absence of sight, it is a curtain, and the beam in your hand is a hand pulling it back. You never know what year will be waiting when you lift it again. At first, it's nothing more than a passing amusement. You roll the dice on a quiet evening, watching the pips scatter across the table. The numbers fall neatly, unusually neatly. But you don't think much of it. A week later, you see the lottery results printed in the paper, and without meaning to, your mind matches them to your memory of that throw. The alignment is exact. Curiosity takes over. You try again, jotting down each roll. 6 days later, the winning numbers appear, and once more, they match. Not just roughly, perfectly, in sequence and value. The odds of such a repetition are beyond reasonable calculation. Soon, you find yourself treating the dice less as toys and more as instruments, holding your breath before each cast, as though your hands might disturb some delicate thread between now and what is to come. History holds scattered references to oracular games, objects meant for chance that instead seem to deliver knowledge. From carved bones in ancient divination to the peculiar use of playing cards by fortune-tellers, these tools were often thought to act as bridges between what is and what will be. Skeptics see only patterns sought after the fact, the human mind retrofitting memory to match outcome. But your dice do not wait for hindsight. Their predictions arrive in silence before tickets are printed, before numbers are drawn. Some might argue that you've stumbled into an improbable run of chance. Others would suggest something stranger, that the act of rolling is not random at all, but a way of reading the fixed shape of events already settled in some deeper, unseen structure of time. And yet, with each perfect match, another question begins to press against the edge of your thoughts. If the dice can reveal the future so easily, what else might they be able to tell you? And would you want to know? It hangs where it always has, a quiet landscape you've grown accustomed to, a winding river beneath a pale spring sky, trees just beginning to green. You pass it each day without thinking, until one morning you stop mid-step. The sky is no longer soft with early light, but a deep summer blue. The trees are full and heavy with leaves, their shadows stretching longer across the grass. The change is flawless, not a sign of new paint or tampering, as though this is how the scene has always been. You leave the room, return later, and find autumn in its place, leaves turned amber and gold, the river moving more slowly under a low, clouded sun. No one else in the house claims to have touched it. Art history holds a few strange accounts of paintings that seem to shift over time. Some were explained by the slow fading of pigments or the effects of light and humidity, altering the tones of a canvas until the image appeared subtly different. But there are rarer, harder to explain stories, landscapes whose weather seemed to change, portraits whose expressions softened or grew severe, not over years, but from one day to the next. In certain traditions, paintings were thought to hold a living aspect, not in movement, but in responsiveness, reflecting the unseen state of the place or person depicted. The rational mind turns to perception, to the possibility of memory playing tricks, of details overlooked until they seem suddenly new. Yet the seamlessness here resists that comfort. There are no brushstrokes out of place, no sign the artist painted more than one version. Still, the scene continues its quiet cycle, spring to summer, summer to autumn, autumn to winter, and back again. And as you stand before it, you begin to wonder, not what the painting shows you, but what it sees when you're not in the room. It arrives in the usual bundle of mail, bills, advertisements, the occasional handwritten envelope. This one catches your eye because the handwriting on the front is unmistakably your own. The loops, the spacing, the way you form certain letters, it's not just similar, it's exact. Inside, there's a postcard depicting a city you've never visited. The streets, the skyline, the landmarks are all foreign, yet the image feels faintly familiar, as if from a dream half remembered. The message is brief, written in the same hand. A few sentences about the weather, a cafe by the river, a note that you'll understand soon. There's no return address. The postmark confirms it was sent days ago, from that very city. The first impulse is to assume a prank, but friends and family swear they had no part in it. Forensic examination would likely confirm the handwriting is yours, down to the pressure of the pen and the rhythm of the strokes. In folklore, such occurrences echo the idea of the traveling double, a self that moves ahead or aside from you, sending tokens back across the divide. Some old maritime tales even tell of sailors receiving letters from their own hands, describing ports they would only later reach. Modern psychology might frame it as an elaborate hoax, a forgery crafted with access to your past notes. But the unease deepens when, weeks later, you notice small overlaps, the cafe's name appearing in a news story, the weather in the postcard matching a report you hear by chance, even the faint pull of recognition when you see the city's name again. Whether it is a warning, a promise, or a glitch in the ordinary chain of time, the letter sits quietly among your papers, waiting for the day you understand. Photographs are meant to fix a moment in place, faces, settings, and relationships caught in unchanging detail. A family portrait is especially so. Familiar expressions, the clothes you remember wearing, the background you know by heart. But in this one, there is someone else. A smiling figure stands among you, close enough to suggest belonging, yet utterly unfamiliar. Their clothes match the era, their posture fits the mood, but you have no memory of them being there. When you ask, your family reacts not with surprise, but with confusion at your confusion. Each insists they've met this person, at gatherings you also attended, yet no one can recall when or how they joined the group. Names are given, but differ from one person to another. Details shift. In some tellings, they were a neighbor, in others, a distant cousin. The more you press, the more the answers slip into vagueness, as though the memory resists being pinned down. Photography has its mundane anomalies, double exposures, printing errors, strangers drifting into frame at the last moment. Yet in this image, the figure is perfectly posed, interacting with those beside them as though they belonged there all along. Archivists sometimes uncover such mysteries in historical photos. Individuals who appear in multiple unrelated collections, unchanged by time, their identities never confirmed. The portrait remains on the shelf, the stranger's smile as fixed as everyone else's, and you begin to wonder if the image has captured more than a moment, if it has recorded a presence that exists only when the camera looks. It is there one morning, leaning casually against your fence as though it has always belonged. At first, you think it must be a neighbor's, left by mistake. But the shape of the frame draws you closer, the curve of the handlebars, the small dent on the chain guard, the faint scratch across the seat where you once dropped it against a wall. It is not just similar, it is identical to the bicycle you lost years ago on another continent entirely. You walk around it, touching the chipped paint, tracing the pattern of wear on the pedals. Even the small sticker, half peeled from the rear fender, is there. The one from the corner shop you used to pass on your way to school. The tires are inflated, the chain oiled, as though it has been in use. Yet, no one you know could have brought it here. Bicycles are not unique objects. Frames are mass-produced, colors repeated, accessories swapped. That is the rational explanation. But this one carries too many of your marks, the unrepeatable record of your time with it. And when you check the serial number, stamped faintly under the crank, it matches. Stories like this surface occasionally in community papers or local forums. Possessions lost in one place turning up, intact, thousands of miles away, often after many years. Explanations vary from theft and improbable resale to clerical errors in auction lots. More speculative voices speak of objects slipping through unnoticed cracks in the boundaries we take for granted. You keep the bicycle, unsure if it has truly returned or if it never really left. Sometimes, when you ride it, you wonder where it has been, and if somewhere else, someone once looked into their yard and saw it missing. ChatGPT said, "It turns up in an ordinary way, slid to the corner of a drawer, caught in the lining of an old coat, resting where it shouldn't be. The metal is cool, heavier than you expect for its size. Its bow is worn smooth, as though it has been turned in a lock countless times, but not by you. You try it on the doors you know, front, back, the shed, the attic, but none accept it. Still, it does not feel like a stranger's possession. The weight in your palm seems balanced to your grip, the teeth aligning with a familiarity that's hard to explain. You can almost imagine the resistance of the right lock turning, the faint click that would follow. Keys like this have surfaced in old stories and personal accounts, objects without an apparent purpose that nonetheless resist being discarded. Some are later found to fit forgotten padlocks or inherited furniture. Others never find their match, yet are kept for years, as though parting with them would close off something intangible. There are, of course, practical explanations. The key may belong to a place you once visited, a lock now changed, a building long demolished. But there's another interpretation, quieter and harder to test, that the key still has its lock, just not in the version of the world you currently occupy. In that other place, the door still stands, waiting for you to return and turn the mechanism as you've done before. Until then, it remains in your possession. You may move it from pocket to pocket, from drawer to drawer, never quite letting it go. Not because you know where it belongs, but because, somehow, it still belongs to you. You sit down to rewatch a film you've known for years, the kind where every scene feels imprinted in memory. The dialogue unfolds just as you recall, the familiar pacing, carrying you toward its inevitable conclusion. But when the final act arrives, something is wrong. The characters take different paths, speak lines you've never heard, and the story ends on a note you do not recognize. The credits roll over images that were never part of the film you knew, and yet the production dates, the cast, the director, everything remains the same. In cinema history, altered endings are not unheard of. Test screenings have led studios to reshoot climaxes, alternate versions have been prepared for foreign markets, and extended cuts sometimes replace the original in circulation. These changes, however, are documented, leaving behind press releases, interviews, or fan discussions. What you've just seen leaves no such trace. Searching for confirmation yields nothing. Everyone else remembers the ending you just witnessed as if it has always been there. Folklore and urban legends have their own take on this phenomenon, likening it to story drift, where a tale subtly rewrites itself across tellings, yet insists it has never changed. Some describe it as slipping into an adjacent thread of reality, one where the film was always made this way. Science offers the comfort of faulty memory, of details blurred by time, yet the sharpness of your recollection makes that explanation thin. You turn off the television, trying to summon the version you once knew, scene by scene. But the more you replay it in your head, the more it feels like a film you imagined, a story that perhaps only existed for you, until it quietly vanished, leaving behind the version everyone else has always seen. It happens the first time without much thought, a street lamp humming to life as you walk past. It's not unusual at night, but the sky is bright, the sun still high. The second time, on a different day, it's harder to ignore. The same lamp, the same sudden glow triggered the moment your steps draw near. Soon, it becomes a pattern. You try varying your route, approaching from different angles, even crossing the street to pass it from afar. Still, the light responds, blooming into brightness as though it has been waiting for you. Utility workers might dismiss it as a faulty sensor or a quirk in the wiring. Yet, no other lamp on the block behaves this way. And there are stranger accounts, people claiming the light changes tone when they linger, or flickers in a deliberate rhythm, as if trying to speak. In some older traditions, a solitary flame that follows a person was considered a spirit companion, a guide, or, in rarer stories, a sentinel, marking those who had crossed into places they shouldn't have. Modern explanations reach for the familiar, motion sensors, electromagnetic interference, or sheer coincidence. But the unsettling edge comes when the timing grows too perfect. When you step into its reach, it turns on instantly, not a second before or after. When you pass without looking, it stays dark. One evening, you stop beneath it and wait. The air is still, the street empty, and yet you feel, without being able to say why, that the lamp is not merely responding to your presence. It is acknowledging you, as if from some shared history you can't quite remember, in a place that wasn't here. Clothing often carries the story of where it came from. Receipts in a drawer, tags with familiar store names, the memory of the day you bought it. But one morning, there it is in your closet, a jacket you've never seen before. It hangs neatly on the rail between the garments you know, its color exactly the shade you might have chosen, its cut flattering, its fabric worn just enough to feel lived in. You try it on, and it fits as though made for you. The label is crisp, stitched in thread, the color of old gold. It bears a brand name that means nothing to you. No online search finds it, no trademark registry claims it. The care instructions list cities you've never visited, some of which you've never even heard of. A few don't seem to exist at all. In the ordinary world, explanations can be practical. A friend leaving something behind, a mix-up at the dry cleaners, a gift forgotten to be mentioned. And yet none of these fit. No one you ask has seen it before, and no one recalls bringing it. Collectors of curiosities sometimes speak of orphan objects, items that arrive without provenance, as though slipped into our world from another. Folklore tells of garments found in ancient ruins that seem impossibly new, or of clothes discovered in attics that match no known fashion period. You hang the jacket back in the closet, but it draws your eye each time you pass. It seems to belong to you. The only question is whether it came from your life or from someone else's entirely. It happens on a day that feels like any other by the sea. Wind steady, sky open, the water restless but familiar. You stand at the edge where foam curls over sand, and for a moment, the rhythm of the surf draws your attention more sharply than usual. In the crash and retreat, there is a shape to the sound, a cadence you can almost follow. Then, without warning, it becomes clear. The waves are speaking your name, not loudly, not in any human tongue, but in a pattern so precise that the syllables emerge again and again, each one carried in the roll and break of water. You listen longer, trying to convince yourself it's chance, the mind finding order in noise, the way clouds sometimes resemble faces. Yet the intervals are too regular, the emphasis too deliberate. The ocean pauses, gathers, and repeats, as though calling across some distance that is not measured in chisinlazas. In coastal folklore, there are stories of the sea speaking to certain people, warnings to fishermen, farewells to sailors lost, messages from those who drowned and never returned. Marine scientists point to wave interference, where colliding swells create repeating sounds that can mimic familiar shapes to the ear. But that does not explain the moments when the sound is accompanied by an unshakable certainty that what you're hearing is meant for you. Some who have experienced it say the voice changes with the tide, shifting from recognition to urging, from calling you toward the water to urging you to stay away. Others claim it fades only after you've answered, even if you whisper back. You walk away eventually, yet the rhythm follows you. In the rush of air through a tunnel, in the distant hum of traffic, in any place where sound moves in waves. Always the same syllables, always your name. It's discovered during the careful unsealing of a time capsule, an unremarkable metal cylinder, its edges dulled by decades underground. The contents are what you might expect: yellowed newspapers, coins no longer in circulation, a few photographs curling at the corners. Then, at the bottom, folded in thirds, there is a sheet of paper. The ink is faded but legible, the handwriting instantly recognizable as your own. It's not just the shape of the letters. It's the small habits you've never been able to break. The way your lowercase g loops high before curving back. The slightly uneven slant that leans more in some words than others. Even the pressure marks on the paper feel familiar, as if your own pen had pressed there. The note is brief, yet unsettling. It addresses no one by name, but speaks in a voice that is undeniably yours, describing fragments of events you know have happened recently. A reference to a conversation from last week, a passing mention of a decision you've been avoiding. And then, at the end, a line you cannot place. Don't lose the key. Archivists confirm the capsule's sealing date, decades before you were born, its location marked in municipal records, its chain of custody intact. Forgery seems implausible, and yet no other explanation fits cleanly. History is not without parallels. Letters found long before their supposed writing dates, artifacts bearing signatures yet to be made, accounts in which personal belongings appear years ahead of their origin. Some dismiss these as elaborate hoaxes or coincidences born from similar handwriting styles. Others suggest something stranger, that in rare moments, objects may carry themselves backward through the folds of time, arriving before their owner ever exists. The letter now rests in an archival envelope, labeled and cataloged, but you keep a photograph of it close, not to prove it to anyone else, but to remind yourself that somewhere, somehow, you may already have lived long enough to send it. It arrives on a windless afternoon, its frame light but sturdy, the fabric faded to soft shades of red and cream. The string is frayed, the tail knotted in places as though repaired many times. Across one corner, carefully stitched in dark thread, are your initials. Precise, deliberate, and unquestionably yours. You have no memory of ever owning a kite like this. Its design feels older, the kind sold in small seaside shops or handmade from scraps by someone who knew exactly how to balance weight and lift. When you hold it, there's the faint scent of salt and sun-warmed fabric, as if it has traveled far before finding its way here. History is filled with objects that drift beyond their origins. Messages in bottles, weather balloons, and even toys have crossed oceans, arriving years after they were lost. Yet, in rare stories passed quietly between families, such objects seem to come not from a distant place, but from another time. In some accounts, they carry signs of a summer long past, a trinket from a childhood that doesn't match the one you lived, or a handmade gift from someone you never met. These are rarely treated as supernatural, more as gentle puzzles that resist being solved. The kite might be explained by coincidence, someone with the same initials, a lost item carried here by wind and chance. And yet, when you run your fingers along the stitching, there's an unshakable familiarity, the way your hands sometimes remember a task before your mind does. Perhaps it belonged to another version of you, one who spent summers on a different shore, letting the kite rise until it blurred against the blue. Now, it rests here, quietly certain of its owner, even if you're still wondering how it found its way back. It's marked like any other emergency exit. Red letters, a push-bar handle, the faint chemical scent of industrial paint. You've passed it dozens of times without notice, but one day, whether by accident or curiosity, you press the bar. There's no alarm, no resistance, only the door swinging open onto a place that cannot be there. Instead of an alley or stairwell, you stand at the edge of a vast field. The air is cool and carries the faint metallic tang of rain, though no clouds hang above. The sky is deep and impossibly clear, scattered with constellations you don't recognize. Some form sharp, geometric patterns, others pulse faintly, as if alive. The ground underfoot is dry and soft, the grass whispering against your shoes. No sound of traffic, no buildings in sight. You test your steps, walking a short distance before glancing back. The door remains, freestanding in the open field, its frame glowing faintly from within. In folklore, this recalls tales of thin places, where the boundaries between worlds wear thin enough to slip through. Certain rural legends speak of doors that open only for some, leading to lands where time moves differently or not at all. Modern reasoning strains to explain it, a disorienting dream, a hallucination triggered by fatigue, or an elaborate staged illusion. But some accounts hint at stranger rules. A few claim the constellations shift with each visit. Others say they returned weeks later to find the door locked, yet the faint scent of that alien grass still clung to their clothes. Whatever waits beyond that threshold, it is not marked on any map, and the way back may not always be where you left it. A signature is meant to be the distilled proof of identity, a mark shaped so many times it becomes instinct, muscle memory on paper. Yet here, in an old legal document, is your name written in a hand that is not yours. The letters are formed differently, some looping where yours are angular, others pressed with a weight you never use. It is dated, notarized, and filed among records that appear otherwise authentic. Forgery is the simplest explanation. Throughout history, signatures have been replicated to steal land, forge wills, or alter contracts. Skilled forgers study every curve, practicing until they can mimic not just the form, but the rhythm of a person's writing. And yet, the deeper you look, the stranger it becomes. This hand does not merely copy yours. It seems to have evolved along a different path, as though it were your signature in another timeline, shaped by habits you never formed. Handwriting analysts sometimes note that penmanship changes subtly over years, influenced by injury, education, even the writing instruments of the time. But such changes leave traces of continuity. Here, there is none. The paper is aged correctly, the ink's composition matches the year, and witnesses' names are familiar. In every respect, it should be genuine, except for the hand that signed it. Archivists have uncovered similar puzzles in historical records. Kings whose signatures shift radically mid-reign, explorers whose journals contain entries and scripts they never used before or after. The page in your hands raises the same quiet question. If handwriting is a reflection of the self, what does it mean when your own belongs to someone else? It sits on a shelf, a souvenir from some past trip or gift shop, its glass curves framing a narrow neck where fine grains of sand should fall. Most of the time, it behaves exactly as expected. Flip it over, and the sand slips downward in a steady stream. But every so often, when you return to the room after leaving it alone, you find the sand has shifted in the opposite direction. The top chamber, which was empty, is filling again. The bottom, which held the settled sand, is emptying grain by grain, as if the flow of time has quietly reversed itself. You try to catch it in the act, standing nearby with your eyes fixed on the glass. Nothing happens. The sand remains obedient to gravity. Yet the moment you turn away, to answer the phone, to pour a drink, to look out the window, something changes. When you glance back, the hourglass is further along in its upward climb, the sand defying every rule you know. Collectors of oddities sometimes speak of reversing timers, usually as folklore. Sailors once claimed to carry them for luck, believing they could unwind a bad hour at sea. In more modern circles, they're mentioned in the same breath as clocks that strike 13 or calendars that repeat dates. No consistent mechanism is ever found. Dismantling one reveals nothing unusual. The unsettling part is not just the movement, but what it implies. If the hourglass is truly running backward when unseen, what else might be? What moments are being unspooled, returned grain by grain to some earlier state you can't perceive? Eventually, you may stop using it to measure time at all, yet you keep it, unable to part with an object that seems to hold its own quiet rules, and perhaps its own quiet calendar. It happens in the blur of movement, footsteps, conversations, the layered sounds of a busy street or market. Through the noise, one sound rises clear, your name, spoken in the exact tone friends use to get your attention. Instinct turns your head before you even think, and your eyes meet a stranger's. They're already looking at you, smiling as though they've found someone they've been hoping to see. There's a brief pause, the kind that feels like the first second of a conversation, but then, without a word, they move away. Not hurriedly, not as though avoiding you, just gone into the crowd. You might assume they've mistaken you for someone else. Names repeat across cities, after all, yet the certainty in their expression lingers, as if they knew not just the name, but you. Some accounts of similar encounters describe other unsettling details. The stranger mouthing words you can't hear, standing in places impossible to reach in the time it takes you to turn, or vanishing down streets that lead nowhere. Psychologists might point to selective attention, the way the brain filters and amplifies familiar patterns, making you notice your name even in a sea of noise. Folklore offers a different view, the idea of the calling double, an echo of yourself from another place, reaching out across a boundary only they can see. Whether it's a case of mistaken identity or something far stranger, the moment leaves a trace. Days later, you may still scan faces in crowds, half expecting to meet the same eyes again, unsure if you would greet them or wait for them to speak your name once more. Some mornings, the mountain rises on the eastern horizon, its outline sharp against the pale light, its ridges etched in quiet shadow. Other days, without any warning, it stands to the west, the same distinctive shape, the same snow-laced slopes, as though it has crossed the span of the valley overnight. It is not subtle. The shift is as certain as the sun's path. Yet no one else seems alarmed. Locals acknowledge it with a shrug, calling it just the mountain, as if this were part of its nature. Maps show it fixed in one place, but when you travel there, the roads always seem to bend in unfamiliar ways, as though the land itself has rearranged to meet it. Throughout history, mountains have held a dual place in human thought, as symbols of permanence and as subjects of strange motion in myth. In Tibetan and Andean traditions, sacred peaks were believed to walk across the earth during certain celestial alignments, pausing in new places to renew their power. Early explorers in polar regions reported ranges that migrated between sightings, later dismissed as navigational error or the mirage-like distortion of atmospheric refraction. Modern explanations lean on tricks of perspective, distant ridges seen from shifting vantage points or identical shapes mistaken for the same peak. Yet the mountain's precise, unmistakable silhouette makes that harder to accept. The change happens in silence, with no rumble of earth, no collapse of stone. One day it is here, another day there, always watching from the edge of vision. And standing in the valley, you can't shake the thought that perhaps it does move, just not while anyone is looking. The horizon shifts, the air remains still, and the mountain keeps its own counsel. It begins as part of the most ordinary routine. The familiar rustle of the packet, the measured scoop of leaves, the gentle bloom of steam rising from the cup. You expect the scent you've known for years, comforting, predictable. But this time, the air carries something else entirely. It's not unpleasant, only unfamiliar. And yet, with a force that surprises you, it feels like home. Not the home you live in now, but a place you can almost remember, layered with voices you can't quite place, and light from a window you've never stood beside. You sip, and the flavor is unchanged. The difference exists only in the air, as though the steam has borrowed its memory from somewhere else. In folklore, this is the borrowed scent, a sign that a moment from another life, another time, has brushed against your own. Some rural traditions treat it as a visitation, a message carried in fragrance from the dead or from a self you might have been. Science offers steadier ground, the power of olfaction to unlock forgotten memories, the brain's tendency to misidentify scents when emotions run high, or the subtle influence of changes in the air and water. Yet these explanations falter when the scent persists over multiple brews, or when others in the room confirm they smell it too, each describing it differently, as if the tea is steeped in something personal to each observer. You try again the next day, half hoping for the return. The cup warms your hands, the steam curls upward, and for a moment, there it is again, that quiet, impossible nostalgia, as if the tea is remembering something for you. A backpack becomes familiar through years of use, its seams, its weight, the way your hands find zippers without looking. You know every pocket, every hidden compartment, or at least, you thought you did. One afternoon, while reaching for something, your fingers catch on a zipper you've never seen before. The fabric looks the same as the rest, worn in all the right places, yet you are certain it wasn't there yesterday. Opening it reveals not an empty space, but objects you don't recognize. A coin stamped with symbols from no known country. A folded note written in a language you cannot identify. A photograph of a street that feels familiar but is lined with buildings you've never seen. Each item carries the texture of use, as if they've been in this pocket for years. In ordinary life, forgotten compartments aren't impossible. Manufacturers sometimes include hidden spaces for valuables, and memory is imperfect. People have been surprised to find old receipts or keys in bags long after they thought them empty. But here, the strangeness lies not just in the pocket's existence, but in the nature of its contents. Stories from travelers and mountaineers speak of packs or coats, revealing unexpected storage. Spaces that seem to appear only under certain conditions, holding tools or trinkets from nowhere. In folklore, such pockets are gifts from spirits, pathways between worlds disguised as ordinary fabric. You zip the pocket shut again, but it doesn't feel hidden anymore. Now you can't stop wondering, if a bag you've carried for years can quietly change, what else in your life might be holding things you were never meant to find? It happens in an instant, or rather, it doesn't happen at all. One moment you're somewhere familiar, mid-step, mid-thought, mid-breath. Then, without warning, a thin slice of time vanishes. Only 5 seconds, yet when awareness returns, the world is entirely rearranged. The room is different. The air smells faintly of something unfamiliar. And around you, people stand frozen, their expressions unreadable, their eyes holding the unsettled weight of someone who has just seen the impossible. You search your memory, but there is no transition, no movement between the two places, no sensation of walking or turning. It's as if you've been cut from one frame and pasted into another. The faces around you don't speak right away. Some look away, others stare openly, as if you have appeared where you shouldn't be. There are documented cases of brief amnesia brought on by head trauma, fatigue, or neurological disturbance, but those leave traces, confusion, physical symptoms, a context that makes sense. This is different. Witnesses sometimes claim they saw you fade in, not enter, that you seemed to arrive in the middle of an action you had already begun elsewhere. Folklore offers parallels. Tales of slip moments, when a person is taken from one path of time and placed on another, with only a blink between them. Science offers no such category, though a few researchers have compared it to micro-sleeps. Except here, the body moves without the mind and the surroundings transform without explanation. When it's over, the people disperse, conversation resumes, and the moment begins to dissolve. Yet you can't shake the sense that those missing seconds were not empty. Something filled them, and whatever it was, it has placed you somewhere you weren't meant to be. It drifts into view against the gray-white blur of a snowstorm, a butterfly, its wings painted in the unmistakable colors of summer. It moves with the light, erratic grace you've seen in warm months, each flutter deliberate yet fragile. For a moment, you wonder if it's some scrap of paper caught in the wind, but then it hovers, adjusts, and arcs away, fully alive. The species is one you know well, the kind that emerges only in the heat, feeding on blossoms that now lie dormant under a crust of ice. Its presence in winter is not simply unlikely, it is impossible. No flowers to feed from, no warmth to sustain it, and yet it flits through the storm as though untouched by the season. Natural history records the occasional out-of-season insect, usually explained by human interference, a specimen released from captivity or carried by freight from faraway climates. Still, there are rarer accounts in which the timing itself is the anomaly, creatures appearing in places and moments they should never exist, behaving as if the rules that govern their lives have been briefly set aside. Some see such events as symbols, omens, messages, or the embodiment of resilience. Others consider the possibility that what you saw was not this season's butterfly at all, but one from another strand of time, slipping through at a point where the two overlap. In that other version of the world, perhaps it is summer now, and the air is heavy with heat. The snow continues to fall. You watch until the butterfly disappears into the pale distance, wondering if it will survive or if it was never bound to your winter in the first place. It turns up among the usual mix of coins, worn copper, dulled silver, the everyday clink of currency. But this one is different. Its weight feels just slightly wrong, the edges a touch sharper. On one side, an unfamiliar crest, a branching design like a tree, though its leaves are shaped more like stars. On the other, the profile of a leader you do not recognize, sharp-eyed, with a name inscribed in clean, angular letters that belong to no known alphabet. The year stamped at the bottom is not impossibly far in the future or past, yet it matches no minting records. Under certain light, the metal seems to shimmer faintly, not with polish, but with something closer to depth, as though the surface hides another layer beneath. Numismatics, the study of coins, holds a long catalogue of anomalies. Trial strikes that never entered circulation, commemoratives for nations that dissolved before release, and counterfeit runs so artful they fooled collectors for decades. But even among these, there are rarities that elude classification, coins bearing symbols from no political history, or faces never claimed by any throne or presidency. In some cases, they have appeared in circulation for a short time before disappearing entirely, as if withdrawn by an unseen hand. Skeptics call such finds clever fabrications, the work of hobbyists or artists seeking to unsettle the curious. Yet holding the coin, feeling the ridges under your thumb, the idea of forgery seems thin. It fits too neatly into your pocket, as though it had always been there, carried from shop to shop without notice. And you can't help but wonder, if it buys nothing here, perhaps its worth belongs to a place you have yet to find, a place where this leader still rules, and the tree of stars grows at the center of the capital square. You sit before the piano, hands falling into the easy rhythm of a song you've played countless times. The opening chords arrive as expected, but then something shifts. A single note sounds brighter or darker than it should. The next sequence no longer belongs to the tune you know. Your fingers still move exactly where they always have, but what fills the air is not the song you intended. It is something else entirely. A melody intricate and haunting, yet undeniably beautiful, as if composed by a part of you you've never met. You stop. Test the keys one by one. Each produces the correct pitch in isolation. But when you begin again, the other melody returns, threading itself through your familiar piece like a hidden voice. Folklore is rich with tales of borrowed music, where an instrument carries fragments of songs from another time or place. In certain traditions, such moments were believed to be gifts from spirits or echoes from a parallel life in which the player's music took a different path. Musicologists might explain it through muscle memory colliding with improvisation, subconscious shifts influenced by mood or environment. Yet this reasoning falters when the new melody repeats exactly each time, as if fixed, waiting to be played. A few rare stories speak of people later discovering the same melody in old sheet music, from composers they'd never studied, or in recordings from cultures they'd never encountered. Eventually, you may try to learn the strange piece in its entirety, fearing that to forget it would be to close a door you didn't know existed. And still, in the quiet moments after the last note fades, you can't shake the sense that the piano was never entirely yours. Fax machines belong to another era. Slow, noisy devices that once carried contracts, memos, and office gossip across phone lines. The one in the corner of your office hasn't been plugged in for years, kept only because no one bothered to throw it away. One afternoon, without warning, it whirs to life. The paper feed stirs, the print head scratches. A single page slides out, warm to the touch. Across the top is tomorrow's date. Below it, headlines you have not heard before. A major announcement, a local event, a market shift. The details are written in the dry, precise style of a newswire, as if they had already happened. There is no sender listed, no transmission number, only the unmistakable marks of fax print. In the world of ordinary explanations, electrical surges can cause dormant electronics to sputter into life, pulling fragments of stored memory from years past. Offices have seen machines print old faxes, thought long erased. But these headlines are not old. They concern events that, as far as you know, have yet to occur. A few researchers have documented similar oddities: messages time-stamped from hours or days in the future, weather reports printed before the storms arrived, sports results published before the games began. Folklore treats them as borrowed reports, glimpses from a timeline running slightly ahead of our own. You set the page aside, telling yourself it's a coincidence. Still, when tomorrow comes, you check the news. And when every headline matches, word for word, you find yourself watching the silent fax machine a little differently, wondering when it will speak again. It catches the light in a way that makes you pause. A small crystal sphere, a gift or a keepsake, sitting quietly on your desk. Inside, it should hold only the shapes and distortions of whatever surrounds it. Yet when the sunlight hits at a certain angle, shadows move within it. Not the vague shimmer of refracted light, but figures. People walking with steady purpose, their outlines crisp against scenery that does not exist anywhere near you. You lean closer. The landscape is unfamiliar. Narrow bridges over black water, tall, spindly towers that sway as if caught in a slow wind, fields of plants with leaves shaped like spirals. The figures move along paths that seem to vanish when they reach the edge of the crystal's curve. None glance upward. None seem aware they are being watched. At first, you think it must be a trick, a reflection of something outside, a distortion of an image on a screen. But the scenes shift from day to night without matching the world around you. Clouds roll in. Rain falls in miniature. The figures carry lanterns that glow faintly in the crystal's depths. Hours later, the setting has changed entirely. A market square, a forest with pale trunks, a shoreline under two moons. Collectors of unusual optics tell stories of living glass, rare pieces cut in such a way that they act as windows to places that cannot be reached. Historians trace similar tales to ancient scrying devices, said to show the distant and the never. You consider putting the crystal away, hiding it from view. But curiosity wins. Each day you find yourself glancing at it, wondering if the figures will ever notice you, or if they already have, and are simply waiting for the moment when the shadows inside step out. It's the kind of discovery you expect only in stories. You're walking the narrow paths between weathered stones, reading the names and dates as you pass, when one catches your attention. The letters are clear despite the age of the granite. Your full name. Beneath it, your own birth date, perfectly correct. And then, the final line, a death date. Today's date. For a moment, the world around you holds still. You check the inscription again, certain you've misread it, but the carving is precise, the numbers sharp, as though the mason finished them only hours ago. The flowers at the base are fresh. Cemeteries are not without errors. Records mix, names repeat, and coincidences occur. Yet the alignment of name, birth, and a death date that has only just begun feels too exact to be chance. Such accounts have surfaced before, travelers stumbling upon their own graves, sometimes in places they've never visited. In folklore, it is called a living grave, often interpreted as a warning, a sign to change one's path before fate catches up. Others entertain different possibilities. Perhaps the stone does not mark a life that has ended, but one that has yet to diverge from another version of events. In that place, your death did occur today, and the inscription is simply the residue of a timeline brushing against your own. You stand there longer than you mean to, reading your name again and again. Eventually, you walk on, though with the quiet awareness that the date on that stone still belongs to you, and, for now, the day is not yet over. It sits on your table, no larger than a shoebox, wrapped in plain brown paper with your name printed in neat black letters. There is no return address, no postal mark, only the weight of something solid shifting faintly inside when you move it. You try to peel back the tape, but it will not lift. Scissors catch and bend. blades scraping uselessly against the seam. A knife leaves no mark, as if the adhesive is part of the paper itself. Even tearing at the cardboard yields nothing. It resists like stone. The more you try, the more the box seems unchanged. Its surface is smooth, unscarred, indifferent to effort. Objects sealed beyond opening have their echoes in history. Some cultures buried treasures in containers meant never to be unbound, believing that what was inside would lose its power if exposed. In ancient temples, ritual chests were wrapped in bindings that could only be undone during specific ceremonies, sometimes centuries apart. Yet here, there is no key, no date, no inscription to hint at when or how the box is meant to open. The logical explanations, industrial adhesives, hidden mechanisms, fall short when nothing cuts, melts, or pries the surface. Some would call it a puzzle, an elaborate prank. Others might see it as a delivery out of sequence meant for a time when the means to open it exists. You set it down, listening for any sound from within, but it remains silent. And as the days pass, its presence begins to feel less like an object to be opened and more like a quiet reminder, waiting, patient, as though it knows you will one day be ready for what it holds, even if that day has not yet arrived. It begins with a moment of routine, typing your password into a login field without much thought. But instead of your usual account, a different dashboard appears. The username isn't yours. The profile picture is unfamiliar. Yet as you scroll, the details unfold with a strange precision. Photographs from your childhood, messages you never wrote but that sound exactly like you, records of events you remember living, mixed with others you've never experienced at all. Dates align closely with your own life, but bend in subtle ways. A school you didn't attend, a job you never applied for, friends whose names you know, yet whose faces are wrong. The further you explore, the more it feels like reading a version of your history that unfolded in parallel, shaped by choices you never made. Technically, the event seems impossible. Digital systems are built on authentication, on the rigid math of credentials. Yet stories circulate, buried in niche forums and whispered among cybersecurity circles, about credential drift, where a login inexplicably bridges into a different dataset entirely. Folklore offers its own lens, likening it to mirrors that show another life or books that record your days in someone else's hand. Most who encounter it log out quickly, afraid of crossing some invisible boundary, but a few linger, drawn deeper into that alien familiarity. Some report finding entries dated weeks or months into the future, detailing moments they later lived through exactly, down to the smallest word or gesture. And when they try to log in again, the account is gone, as if it had never existed, leaving only the unease that your password may still be opening doors you cannot see. Wild birds are not strangers to mimicry. Parrots, mynas, and certain songbirds can imitate human speech with uncanny accuracy. But this one is different. It lands beside you in the stillness of morning, tilts its head, and in a clear, deliberate voice speaks a phrase you have heard before, not from waking life, but from a dream you had days ago. The words are exact, the tone eerily close to how you remember them. Your mind searches for the plausible. Perhaps the bird learned the phrase from someone nearby, and the coincidence is only in your hearing. Dreams often recycle fragments of reality, and maybe this was one of them, something overheard, forgotten, and then returned to you by chance. Ornithologists note that certain species can mimic sounds they hear only once, storing them in memory for surprising lengths of time. And yet, the dream had no clear origin. The phrase came from a scene unlike anything in your daily life, spoken by a voice you cannot place. In folklore, birds are often messengers, bridges between worlds, carrying words from the living to the dead, or from the present into the yet to come. Some cultures even believe that to hear your dream spoken aloud by a bird is to receive a warning or a reminder meant for you alone. When the bird finishes, It lingers just long enough to meet your eyes before taking flight. The echo of the phrase remains in your mind, not fading like most dreams, but settling in. A fragment of some other conversation, delivered across the thin line between sleeping and waking. It sits on the edge of a rural road, a field that should be as predictable as the seasons. By day, it's ordinary. Neat rows of crops stretching toward the horizon. Yet those who pass it often enough begin to notice something they can't explain. One evening, it is corn, the stalks tall and green, tassels catching the wind. The very next morning, without a sound of machinery or a trace of disturbance in the soil, the same land is covered in wheat, golden heads bowing under their own weight, ready for harvest. Locals have tried to keep track, driving past at different hours, noting the changes. There is never a moment when the transformation is seen. One day, corn. The next, wheat. Sometimes it stays the same for a week, lulling you into thinking it's ended, only to swap again overnight. There are no discarded stalks, no leftover roots, no sign that anything has been removed or planted. Farming records list the plot under a single owner, yet no one in town recalls seeing them work the land. Agricultural experts suggest tricks of memory, or perhaps an alternating set of nearby fields causing confusion. But the more the pattern is observed, the harder it is to dismiss. Satellite images taken days apart confirm the changes, though each photo shows a field in perfect, undisturbed condition. Folklore in the region speaks of wandering soil, land that drifts between seasons, tied to cycles older than the calendar. In these stories, crops grow not by seed, but by some deeper rhythm, sprouting what the land remembers rather than what is planted. No matter the explanation, those who watch the field find themselves slowing down as they pass, trying to guess what will be growing there tomorrow, and wondering what might appear if the pattern ever changes to something entirely new. It begins with a half-completed puzzle spread across your table, pieces loosely grouped by color and edge. You leave it for the evening, expecting to return to the same scattered arrangement. But when you come back, something is different. A cluster of pieces you hadn't placed is now fitted together. Not only that, the emerging image isn't what the box promised. At first, you think it's a trick of your own memory. Perhaps you misread the picture or misremembered where you left off. But over the next few days, the changes continue. Pieces you were certain belonged to the border now form the outline of something else entirely. A tower appears where there should have been a tree. A pale sky turns to deep water. Each time you step away, the puzzle's design drifts further from the original. There are documented oddities involving puzzles, misprints, swapped pieces between sets, even deliberate double images designed to surprise the solver. Yet those explanations fail when the alterations occur without human hands. Accounts exist, scattered through hobbyist forums and old letters, of puzzles that seem to choose their own image, the final picture unmatching any reference or box art. One theory suggests that the puzzle may not be changing at all, but rather revealing what was always there, a picture aligned to some other version of reality, slowly assembling itself through the smallest shifts. Another proposes that the image is being replaced by something it remembers, drawn from a different time or place entirely. Eventually, you realize you're no longer trying to complete the picture from the box. You're simply waiting to see what it will decide to become. And in that waiting, there's the quiet, disquieting sense that the puzzle is finishing you too, shaping the way you look at it piece by piece. It happens at the same intersection, though never at the same hour. You're waiting at the crosswalk when the light changes from green to yellow, then to red, and the world simply stops. The car beside you halts mid-roll, its driver's hand frozen halfway to the radio. A cyclist balances perfectly still, one foot suspended above the pedal. Even the air feels held, as a bird overhead remains pinned in place, wings caught in mid-beat. Sound vanishes into a soft, unmoving hush. You can breathe, you can move, but everything else is fixed as if caught inside a photograph. Then, without warning, motion returns. The bird finishes its flight, the car rolls forward, the sounds of the city resume, and no one seems to notice anything happened. Accounts of time pauses have quietly circulated for centuries. In some medieval chronicles, monks recorded moments when bells froze in mid-swing, their clappers suspended, while townspeople stood immobile until the strike resumed. More recent stories describe soldiers halting mid-step or factory machines locking in place, not due to mechanical fault, but to a sudden, complete stillness of the world itself. These incidents, though rare, often recur in the same location, as though certain points in space are bound to faults in time. Science has no place for such moments, dismissing them as memory gaps, fainting spells, or tricks of perception. Yet the consistency of the setting, the same intersection, the same light, suggests something more fixed, as if the red signal itself is a key. You begin to wonder if the light's purpose is not to stop traffic, but to stop everything, for reasons unseen. And as you cross when the world resumes, you can't help but glance back, half expecting to find the moment still waiting, sealed and motionless, just a step behind you. It starts with a simple task, measuring a wall to see if a new bookshelf will fit. The tape clicks out, numbers align, and you make a note. Days later, you check again, just to be sure, and the length is different. Not by much, an inch here, a few centimeters there, but enough to be undeniable. You test it multiple times, certain you've made a mistake. Yet every reading is precise in its own way, each consistent within that moment, and each different from the last. At first, it's almost amusing. You measure other walls, door frames, the height of a window. All of them shift, subtly but persistently. You change tapes, use laser tools, even mark the measurements directly on the surface. The markings remain exactly where you left them, but the numbers no longer match. Carpenters and architects might attribute it to warped materials, settling foundations, or fluctuations in temperature and humidity. Folklore, however, has older explanations: rooms that breathe, houses that grow and shrink in rhythm with their unseen inhabitants. In some traditions, shifting measurements were a sign that a dwelling was alive, in some sense, its geometry belonging to another order than human design. There are stranger reports, too, cases where the variations form patterns, converging on specific numbers, or aligning with dates significant to the occupant. A few claim that once the changes begin, they never stop. And while the differences are rarely enough to be noticed in daily life, the knowledge remains. You are living inside something that refuses to stay the same size, no matter how carefully you try to pin it down. Beds are heavy things, frames set in place, mattresses settled into grooves on the floor, the sort of furniture that does not move without effort. Yet one morning you wake, and something feels subtly wrong. The light from the window falls at a different angle. The room's corners seem rearranged. Then you realize your bed is facing an entirely different direction. The headboard now against a wall it has never touched. The view from your pillow entirely changed. You search for signs of disturbance. The floor bears no scratches. Objects on the nightstand sit exactly where you left them, untouched and upright. Nothing else in the room appears altered, as though the bed had always been there. Memory insists otherwise. You can picture perfectly where it stood the night before. Practical explanations are thin. Sleepwalking strong enough to move a bed should leave marks, noise, or at least the ache of exertion. In shared houses, a prank might be possible, but why go to such lengths without a trace? In recorded cases of earthquakes or subsidence, furniture can shift, but such movements leave signs in the walls and floors. Here, everything else is undisturbed. In folklore, sudden changes in room arrangement are sometimes called spatial slips, moments when the geometry of a place shifts to match another version of itself. In dreams, too, rooms are rarely fixed. They reshape themselves without notice. You lie back down, trying to recall if you ever fell asleep facing this direction before. The walls look the same, but the space feels slightly borrowed. as if it belongs to a version of your life where the bed was always here. It first seems like nothing more than a quirk of the air, a draft perhaps, or the subtle shift of someone walking past. Yet the longer you watch, the stranger it becomes. The candle's flame does not flicker randomly, nor sway with the rhythm of breath or breeze. Instead, it leans, sharply, unwaveringly, toward a fixed point in space where nothing is visible. The wax pools, the wick burns, but the flame remains angled, straining toward that emptiness as though pulled by a weight you cannot see. You move the candle, testing for airflow. The lean persists, adjusting to maintain its aim at the same unseen spot. Hold your hand in its path, and the warmth is uneven, concentrated not where the flame points, but as if heat is sliding away, slipping toward that direction. In old maritime journals, there are accounts of compass flames aboard ships, candles said to incline toward storms still far beyond the horizon. Some mystics claimed such leanings marked gates, places where the boundary between worlds grew thin. Modern physics offers no rule for why fire would behave as though influenced by a gravity that is not here. Occasionally, you think you see a faint shimmer in that space, as if the air there is heavier, bending light. The sensation is subtle, but undeniable. The way your stomach might react to standing near the edge of a drop you can't see. Eventually, the candle burns low. You consider lighting another, just to see if it will lean in the same way. But a quieter thought intrudes. If the flame is pointing toward something, then perhaps, somewhere on the other side, something has already noticed the flame and is leaning back. It starts as a casual game, the easy rhythm of aim, release, and the faint thud of darts striking cork. You line up the throw, feel the weight in your fingers, and let it go. The dart flies true, too true to miss. Yet just before impact, the board isn't where it should be. It's still on the wall, but shifted half a foot to the side, the dart sinking into bare wood. The movement isn't the kind you'd notice in motion. It's as if the board had always been in its new position and only you recall it differently. You test yourself, throwing again, and for a moment it's fine. Then, another perfect throw meets the same fate. Each time it happens, you're left holding the odd certainty that the target moved, not your aim. Games with fixed points, archery, darts, even simple ring toss, have long been used to test skill and precision. Yet in scattered personal accounts, the target itself becomes unreliable, as though reacting to the act of being struck. Some frame it as a quirk of perception, where expectation corrects itself too late. Others wonder if the target is avoiding the hit, not consciously, but as part of a deeper rule, that certain moments of success cannot occur in this exact alignment of events. In folklore, there are echoes of this idea, tales of enchanted hunts where prey dodges an arrow not by moving, but by the world shifting beneath it. The suggestion is that the target and the throw are linked in ways we don't understand, and that altering one alters the other. You keep playing, but now the game feels different. It's no longer about accuracy. It's about whether, in the instant of release, you and the target will agree on where it's supposed to be. You slip on the sunglasses without much thought, the kind you've worn 100 times before. But when you look toward the horizon, something changes. Beyond the familiar outline of hills, faint and distant, rise mountains you've never seen. Vast, pale shapes layered one behind another, their ridgelines tinted in blue and silver. They are too far to exist in your view, yet they remain, when you turn your head, as steady and solid as the nearer land. Removing the glasses erases them instantly. The horizon returns to its ordinary sweep, unbroken and finite. History holds quiet stories of lenses that reveal what should remain hidden. Some are rooted in the work of explorers, whose telescopes once brought into sight islands no chart had recorded, only for those islands to vanish when seen again. In certain rural tales, seeing stones were said to show hidden roads, lost villages, or distant lands existing alongside the known world. glimpsed only through a specific piece of glass. Modern optics might explain it as a trick of refraction, the filtering of light in such a way that distant features, obscured by haze to the naked eye, become faintly visible. Yet the sharpness of the mountains, their unchanging presence through the tinted lenses, suggests more than atmospheric clarity. They feel deliberate, as if they belong to a map just beyond ours, their slopes leading into places no path here can reach. You find yourself glancing through the glasses more often, watching the mountains as though they might move, or perhaps draw nearer, while the rest of the world remains unaware they exist at all. It turns up in the smallest of ways, wedged at the back of a drawer you've opened hundreds of times, a military pin, heavy for its size, its enamel still gleaming. The insignia is crisp but unfamiliar, and the engraved text names a battle you've never heard of, in a place you've never known. A date accompanies it, precise down to the day, yet nothing in the history books matches. At first, you assume it's a replica from some reenactment, a misplaced collectible. But the metal shows the kind of wear that comes from years of being handled, not manufactured yesterday. You ask friends, search archives, pore over maps. The location is real, but no record of any conflict there exists, at least, not in this reality. In folklore, such artifacts are sometimes called slip relics, objects believed to cross from histories adjacent to our own. Legends tell of coins from empires that never rose, letters written in languages that were never spoken here, medals awarded for victories that never occurred. Modern theories reach for the rational, mix-ups in memorabilia markets or deliberate hoaxes crafted with historical flourishes. But there are details harder to dismiss. The fastening clasp matches a design used only in a narrow window of time, long before you were born. The patina of age is consistent across every surface, down to the faint etching of initials on the back, which happen to match your own. You return it to the drawer, uncertain whether it belongs to you or to the version of you who fought in a war that here was never fought at all. At first, it looks like any other satellite, a faint, steady point sliding silently across the night. You've seen dozens, their paths predictable, their light constant. But this one flickers. Not the random shimmer of atmosphere, but sharp, deliberate bursts. Long, short, short, long. You watch, and the pattern repeats. It takes a moment to realize you recognize it. It's Morse code. And then, the shapes of the letters form into something impossible. Your name. You search for a rational path. Amateur satellite trackers know that tumbling debris can reflect sunlight in irregular flashes, creating the illusion of coded light. In some cases, rotating antennas or solar panels catch the sun in rhythmic intervals. But this is too precise, the spacing too consistent, and the odds of such a signal matching your name by chance are vanishingly small. Historically, Morse code has been used for everything from ship-to-shore signals to deep space probes, but never for personal messages to an unknowing observer. Astronomers occasionally report mysterious repeating flashes from classified satellites, their purposes undisclosed. A few of these have generated rumors of covert tests, or even of deliberate attempts to communicate without official channels. Still, the thought lingers. If someone, or something, can send a name into the night sky, they also know where to aim it. And if they can see you, they can see you now. The satellite passes over the horizon, its light fading into darkness, but the pattern remains in your mind. A message, personal and precise, written in the brief language of light. The bloom in stone. By day, the pavement is unremarkable. A stretch of unbroken concrete, pale and sun-worn, with no crack wide enough for even a blade of grass. Yet one morning, there it is. A single flower, rooted where no soil exists. Its stem rises straight from the stone, leaves flawless, petals open in full color, and a fragrance that cuts through the scent of dust and heat. You search for the fracture it must have grown through, but the surface is seamless, as though the plant has passed directly through the barrier between what can grow and what cannot. Botanists might speak of seeds carried by wind and lodged in invisible fissures, of roots forcing apart the smallest imperfections. Yet this bloom has no weathering around it, no sign of struggle, as if it did not grow here at all, but simply appeared. In older stories, such flowers were said to mark blessings or warnings, a signal that the land itself had spoken. By evening, it may still be there, or it may vanish, leaving only the smooth, untouched stone behind. The box of vanished things. It has been sealed for as long as you can remember, its lid closed with string or tape that has yellowed with age. You keep it in an attic or cupboard, its contents forgotten. One day, you open it, perhaps by accident, perhaps because curiosity wins, and inside are objects you thought gone forever. A missing earring, a childhood photograph, a book you lent to someone years ago and never saw again. Each sits where it should not be, clean and intact as though it had never left. There is no sign of how they arrived, no broken seal, no disturbance in the dust. People who have experienced this speak of the strange comfort it brings, tempered by unease. If the box can return what is lost, then where did it go in the meantime? Folklore calls such containers keepers' chests, which collect what the world misplaces. The only question is whether the box found the objects, or the objects found their way back to the box. It's found in the back of a closet, a container you know hasn't been opened in years. The lid is taped shut, the dust undisturbed. You peel it back expecting old papers or forgotten clothes, but inside are objects you're certain were gone. A pen you lost in school, a watch you left on a train, a book you lent to someone who moved away. The items are unchanged, as if no time has passed, no wear from travel, no signs of use beyond what you remember. Each one rests as though deliberately placed, arranged without clutter, the way you might lay them out if you were returning them to yourself. In practical terms, misplaced belongings often reappear in unlikely spots, carried by absent-mindedness or forgotten cleaning. Yet the sealed state of the box defies such explanations. Some accounts describe similar events: keys, rings, and letters resurfacing in closed drawers or locked trunks, years after vanishing without trace. Folklore treats these as the work of borrowers, or unseen custodians, entities that take and return objects according to rules of their own. Others imagine a stranger mechanism, moments where the boundaries between different versions of the past thin, allowing something from the other history to slip into this one. In that other timeline, perhaps you never lost the pen, never left the watch behind, never lent the book at all. You keep the box, uncertain whether to remove its contents or leave them as they are. Part of you fears that taking them out might break whatever path allowed them to return. For now, they remain inside, proof that some losses are not permanent, even if their journey back can't be explained. At first, you think it's the light, morning sun softening the edges of your face, evening shadows sharpening them. But soon, the changes go beyond shadow. Some days, your reflection carries lines and creases you do not have, a dullness in the eyes that feels years ahead of you. Other times, the glass returns a younger version, skin smoother, hair fuller, a posture lighter than your own. The shifts follow no clear pattern, though they always match the time of day. Morning may show an aged face, evening a younger one, or the reverse. The mirror itself is ordinary, framed in plain wood, unchanged in every other respect. Mirrors have long been objects of suspicion and fascination. In certain Victorian households, they were covered at night to prevent the soul from wandering. In older rural traditions, mirrors were avoided during storms, lest they capture something unintended. Folklore in parts of Eastern Europe spoke of time mirrors, panes said to reveal a person's past or future self during specific hours, often tied to the position of the sun. Science leans on subtler explanations, changes in blood flow, lighting, and perception creating the illusion of different ages. Yet the precision here resists those theories. The version you see is not a vague impression, but a fully realized face, complete with details you could not invent, a faint scar that does not yet exist, a streak of gray not yet grown in, or conversely, a brightness in the eyes you barely remember having. Over time, you begin to linger at the mirror longer than necessary, wondering whether it shows you as you are, as you were, or as you will be, and which of those, if any, belongs to the life you're living now. It begins innocently, a book picked up from a secondhand shop, or found tucked behind others on your own shelf. The title doesn't ring a bell, yet the pages feel worn in a way that suggests it's been read many times. You start casually, expecting an ordinary story, but as you near the end, the words begin to align uncomfortably with your own life, small details at first, then entire sentences that mirror private moments. Then comes the final page. The last paragraph is not just familiar, it's exact. Word for word, it matches an entry you wrote in your journal only yesterday. The same punctuation, the same phrasing, the same private turns of thought you've never shared aloud. The date in the book's printing is decades old. Literary historians sometimes collect accounts of anticipatory texts, works that seem to predict, or recall, moments in a reader's own life. Folklore frames it differently, as a crossing of narratives, where the story of your life and the story in the book have momentarily become the same. Modern explanations lean toward coincidence, cryptomnesia, or even subtle influence. Perhaps you encountered the phrasing years ago and forgot it until it resurfaced in your writing. But such reasoning feels thin when the match is perfect, down to the rhythm of your sentences and the personal meaning they hold. Some who've experienced this refuse to keep the book, leaving it behind in libraries or giving it away. Yet there are others who keep it close, wondering if, somewhere, the next chapter is already written, and whether it ends in ink or in thought. Lakes are contained worlds, shaped by their shorelines, bound by their depths. You know every boat that passes here, small fishing craft, quiet rowboats, perhaps the occasional tourist ferry. But one afternoon, the water parts around something vast. A ship, larger than any that could have reached this place, rests in the center of the lake. Its hull towers over the waterline, paint faded, windows dark. It sits impossibly still, without wake or anchor lines, as though it had been placed there whole. You scan for explanations. No channels connect this lake to the sea. No roads could have carried such a vessel. The depth charts wouldn't allow it to float without scraping bottom. And yet, it is undeniably there, a shadow stretching across the water's surface. In history, there are rare accounts of ships found stranded far inland after floods or tsunamis, but always with traces of the disaster that carried them. This lake shows no disturbance. Folklore, too, tells of wandering vessels that slip between bodies of water, appearing where no tide could reach, ghost ships that dock only in places that never knew harbors. You look away for a moment, perhaps to blink, perhaps to reassure yourself that this is real, and when you turn back, the lake is empty. No ripples, no sound of retreating engines, just the stillness of water as if it had never been broken. The shoreline is unchanged, yet you can't shake the image. A ship too large for its world, anchored in a place it could never belong. It begins as the faintest glint, catching the light at an odd angle when you move your hand. At first, you think it's a strand of hair or a trick of reflection, but when you try to brush it away, it does not move. It is anchored, not to your clothing, not to the surface of your skin, but within it. A fine, silver thread, no thicker than a whisper, emerging cleanly from the back of your hand and stretching outward toward some unseen point in the air. It does not pull or tug, yet it holds tension, as though connected to something far beyond your reach. No matter how you turn, the thread keeps its direction, unwavering, pointing to a fixed location you cannot see. If you try to cut it, the blade passes through without resistance, but the thread remains unbroken, as if the act never happened. In certain folklore, such threads are said to bind the living to places or fates, guiding them like invisible tethers. Some call them soul lines, others traveler's strands, leading to a person, an event, or a moment still to come. Medical explanations fail quickly. It is not embedded beneath the skin like a vein or scar. It is simply there, impossibly, without origin or end. Those who have experienced it often report a sensation in the days after, a subtle pull in the direction the thread points, a faint awareness that something is waiting at its other end. And always, there is the unspoken question: if you were to follow it far enough, would you find where it begins or where it ends? It happens when you scroll through the images on your camera, expecting to see only what you've just captured. The latest photo is ordinary at first glance, taken today, in a familiar place, but then you notice the details that shouldn't be there. A person you haven't seen in years, walking through the frame, a poster on a wall advertising an event that hasn't happened yet, a newspaper in someone's hand with a date from 3 days in the future. You check the timestamp. It matches the moment you press the shutter. The lighting, the angles, the background, all consistent with the here and now. Yet those small anomalies remain, embedded in the pixels. Photography has always been tied to truth and memory, though history is filled with debates about its reliability. Double exposures, digital glitches, and deliberate edits can all alter an image. But there are rarer stories, harder to dismiss. Photographs showing buildings not yet constructed, strangers later identified as future acquaintances, or weather conditions that arrived days after the shot. Skeptics argue that such details are noticed only in hindsight, that the mind edits memory to fit the image once events have unfolded. But another possibility lingers, that the camera, in some rare alignment, captures not only the present light, but the light of what is to come. If time is less a line and more a layered surface, perhaps the lens sometimes dips through, pulling back fragments from days ahead. You keep the photo, checking it again when those future details become the present. And each time they do, the moment you took it feels less like documentation and more like an uninvited glimpse, proof that the future, for at least an instant, was already here. It looks like any other ice cube, clear, solid, a faint cloud trapped in its center. You take it from the tray, expecting the usual cold sting, but the moment it touches your skin, it sears. Not painfully enough to make you drop it, but sharp and insistent, like touching metal under a midsummer sun. The cube hisses faintly, as if reacting to you, yet when you set it down, it behaves normally, melting slowly into a small pool of water. There is no redness, no blister, not even the faint whiteness ordinary frostbite leaves behind. Only the lingering sensation, not heat or cold exactly, but something between. Reports of burning ice are rare, but not without precedent. In polar expeditions of the early 20th century, a few explorers noted ice that caused an inexplicable stinging when handled, even through gloves, dismissed at the time as chemical contamination or the effect of extreme dryness on skin. Folklore in certain coastal regions described summer ice found in tide pools, said to hold the memory of sunlight and release it when touched. The simplest explanation is sensory confusion. The nerves for heat and cold sometimes trigger in overlapping ways, tricking the brain into feeling one when encountering the other. But the sensation here is too precise, too reactive, as though the cube responds specifically to contact with you. You find yourself tempted to test it again, to see if the burn returns, or if the next cube will feel ordinary. Yet part of you hesitates, aware that for reasons you cannot name, this ice feels less like something taken from your freezer, and more like something that has traveled far to be here, carrying a memory it cannot keep for long. You notice it first for its weight, not in your hands, but in the way it seems to weigh on the ground itself. A chain, thick with age, each link mottled with rust and something darker. It stretches in both directions, one end vanishing into the soil to your left, the other swallowed by the earth to your right. No anchors, no posts, no sign of what it might have secured, just metal disappearing cleanly into the ground, as if the earth had grown around it. You try to follow it, tracing one side for several meters before the terrain makes it impossible. It doesn't seem to end, only to sink deeper. Digging would be the next instinct, yet the stories about such things caution against it. In some traditions, a chain like this is said to bind something beneath, a door, a tomb, or a thing that must never rise. Old maritime tales tell of chains leading inland from forgotten shores, tethering lost ships to places they were never meant to reach. Engineers might imagine a mundane origin, an abandoned mooring point, a remnant of industrial machinery. But those explanations falter when the chain runs through untouched woodland or across open fields that show no sign of past construction. There are even accounts of the chain shifting slightly between visits, its curve on the surface subtly different, as though it's being drawn tighter somewhere underground. Whether it is holding something down or pulling something up is a question best left unanswered. Still, you can't help but wonder, each time you pass, whether the weight you feel is only in the iron or in what lies beneath. Second-hand clothes carry the faint traces of other lives, creases shaped by someone else's hands, scents that linger in the weave of the fabric. The hat catches your eye in the thrift store not because it's unusual, but because it feels immediately familiar. The fit is perfect, as though it has been molded to your head over years. And there's a scent, subtle, warm, like a place you can almost picture. A hallway lit by amber lamps, the faint spice of something cooking in the next room, the cool air of an open window at night. You try to place it, but you have never lived in such a house. No photograph in your albums shows it. No memory in your mind walks its floors. Yet the feeling persists, a quiet recognition that is more than scent. It is atmosphere, belonging. In the mundane world, scent is a powerful trigger for memory. A smell can recall childhood moments or long-forgotten days with more force than any photograph. Psychologists have documented cases where unfamiliar scents still provoke strong, specific imagery, as if tapping into impressions inherited from stories, dreams, or even ancestors. Folklore frames it differently. In some traditions, objects keep an echo of the places they've been, carrying it forward to the next owner. A traveler's hat might remember the wind off a foreign coast. A worker's cap might hold the dust of a vanished workshop. You place the hat back on the shelf, but it feels wrong to leave it. When you wear it again, the scent returns, and with it, the sense of a door you've never walked through, but might, someday, recognize. It starts as a harmless novelty, a slow, looping ride at a traveling carnival, the kind meant more for gentle amusement than thrill. You settle into the seat, the safety bar clicking into place, the music tinny and familiar. The ride begins, turning in its steady circle. You expect it to last a few minutes, maybe less, but the loops continue. At first, it's almost pleasant, the rhythm of motion lulling you into a haze. Then you notice something small. The people in the seats across from you are not the same ones who boarded with you. Their clothes are different, their faces unfamiliar. Another loop, and they change again. A mother and child replaced by two teenagers, then by an elderly couple, then by a man sitting alone, staring back at you. You glance toward the operator's booth, but the ride never slows. The scenery outside blurs into the same repeating shapes, the ticket booth, the striped tent, the lights strung overhead. You call out, but your voice seems muted, as if the air around the ride absorbs sound. In some accounts, this is where memory begins to fray. People say they stop recalling how many loops they've made, the order of the faces, even their own reason for boarding in the first place. Folklore paints such rides as traps. Not machines, but thresholds, spinning through more than just space. Eventually, you see someone you recognize among the changing faces, but you can't recall from where. They watch you with an expression that suggests they've been here much longer than you have. And as the ride turns again, you realize they are no longer across from you. They are in your seat, watching someone else. It starts as a sound you can't place, a faint ticking, sharper than the usual drip of a leaky tap. You turn to look, and the sight stops you. From the basin, clear droplets rise in slow arcs, pulled not down but up, vanishing neatly into the mouth of the faucet. The motion is steady, almost graceful, each drop reversing the rule you've known since childhood. You test the air above with your hand. There's no draft, no pull, nothing you can feel. The water is cool against your skin, behaving normally until it reaches the rim of the sink. Then the droplets separate, lift, and vanish upward as if gravity has been inverted in a space no wider than the faucet's shadow. Fluid anomalies like this rarely occur outside controlled experiments. In physics demonstrations, sound waves or electromagnetic fields can suspend or redirect droplets, but these setups require precision equipment, not the quiet isolation of a household bathroom. And yet, accounts do exist, tucked into old letters or passed on as peculiar family stories, rain falling upward for a few seconds, puddles unforming themselves, rivers whose ripples briefly travel against the current. Some might see it as a visual trick, condensation rising in heated air, or the mind misreading a reflection. Others consider the unsettling possibility that what you're seeing is a momentary fault in the constants of the world, a small fracture where the familiar order of forces has slipped, allowing a fragment of another set of rules to take its place. When the motion stops, the faucet is just a faucet again. But you keep glancing at it in the days that follow, half hoping, half dreading that the drops might take flight once more, quietly reminding you that even the most basic laws are only steady until they aren't. The fall begins as they always do in dreams, sudden, soundless, and without a clear starting point. Wind tears past you, the ground rushing closer, though you cannot see where it is. You pull the cord. The parachute blossoms above, and instead of slowing toward a single landing, you are suspended in a widening sky. Below you, the world has multiplied. One horizon holds a desert of pale gold dunes, another, a coastline of black cliffs and green waves. In between are patchwork fields, icy tundra, and forests so dense they look like spilled ink. Each landscape shifts slightly as you drift, like turning the pages of a book you've never read. The air feels layered, different scents and temperatures rising from each world, yet your parachute holds steady, as if deciding where you will land. Dream records across cultures often describe skies that open into more than one place. Tibetan dream yogis spoke of multi-horizon visions as journeys between realms, each world visible from above before choosing a descent. In certain indigenous North American stories, the sky was described as a woven net, each knot leading to a different land, glimpsed only in altered states or visions. Even in modern skydiving circles, a handful of accounts surface of divers reporting impossible terrain layouts, later dismissed as tricks of altitude and adrenaline. Science would frame it as the mind's way of blending stored images into a single scene, the parachute serving as a bridge between states of consciousness. Yet the clarity here, the detail of each horizon, the sense that your landing would have been real, defies the usual haze of dreams. When you wake, you remember not the fall, but the pause, hanging in the air with too many worlds below you, and the faint, unsettling thought that somewhere the parachute has yet to choose. It turns up where it shouldn't, slipped inside a coat pocket, folded between the pages of a book, or lying on your kitchen counter as if you just set it down. A receipt printed on the same thin thermal paper you've handled 1,000 times. The store name is unfamiliar. The address lists a street that doesn't exist in your city. The date is recent. The items are stranger still. You've never bought them. Some you've never even heard of. Moon water syrup, Farron glass seeds, Type 3 anchor pins. Each has a price in the currency you use every day, yet the totals include odd surcharges for things like transit levy or time clearance. At the bottom is a card payment line, your own name, your exact last 4 digits, your signature in the curl you've made since childhood. The rational mind leaps to the obvious, a prank, a prop, a printing error. But such explanations grow thin when the paper smells faintly of a spice you can't name, or when the ink refuses to fade after weeks, unlike every other receipt you own. Folklore collectors group such objects under leakage artifacts, said to slip from parallel histories into ours. They are as likely to be receipts as they are keys, coins, or tickets to events that never happened here. In the few recorded cases, some who've kept the receipt long enough notice unsettling coincidences, items on the list appearing later in their lives, in shops or conversations, as though the purchase was still waiting to happen. Whether it's a fragment from a place you've yet to visit or a life you never lived, it sits quietly among your things, proof that somewhere you have already paid for something you don't yet own. A backpack is a constant companion, its weight on your shoulders, the quiet assurance that everything you need is within reach. One moment, it rests on the chair beside you, exactly where you set it. You turn away just for a moment, and when you look back, it's gone. No one nearby saw anyone take it. No sound, no movement, just absence. You search the room, retrace your steps, question everyone present. Nothing. The loss settles in with a practical dread. Keys, wallet, phone, all vanished with it. Yet hours later, the call comes. Your bag has been found miles away, resting somewhere you've never been that day. Its contents are untouched, arranged exactly as you left them, even down to the way the zippers were pulled shut. In ordinary life, misplaced belongings sometimes turn up in unlikely places through the chain of human error, borrowed without notice, moved and forgotten, carried away by someone who later reconsiders. But these scenarios leave traces, explanations, witnesses, or at least the sense of a path. Here, there is none. Stories like this appear in both folklore and modern accounts, objects slipping out of one place and into another without passing through the space between. Researchers of such anomalies call it a port, borrowing the term from seance lore, where objects were said to materialize from thin air. You pick up the bag, its weight reassuring, yet changed. Now, every time you set it down, you feel the faint unease of knowing it could be somewhere else in an instant, without warning and without reason. The stone that hums. You find it by chance, on a path, in a garden, among the pebbles lining a stream. At first, it is unremarkable, smooth, palm-sized, the muted gray of countless others. But when you pick it up, you feel it, a faint, steady vibration, like the distant hum of machinery or the purr of something alive. Press it to your ear, and the sound deepens. Not quite a tone, not quite a rhythm, but something between the two. The hum stops the moment you set the stone down, only to return when it rests again in your palm. Geologists can identify no mechanism, no trapped insect, no chemical reaction to explain it. Folklore speaks of singing stones that resonate with places or people, their hum said to match a heartbeat or an unseen current underground. Some who have carried them say the vibration changes in unfamiliar places, as if the stone is reacting to something you cannot sense. The lock that knows. The chest is old, its metal tarnished, the lock heavy and intricate. You have never seen it open, and no one has ever given you a key. Yet, when your hand rests on it, the mechanism clicks softly, and the latch lifts without resistance. Inside are objects that seem meant for you. A book in your language, though printed a century ago. A photograph of a place you have not visited but feel you've known. A letter addressed in handwriting you almost recognize. Others try to open it, but for them, the lock refuses to turn. Locksmiths find no flaw, no hidden release. In certain traditions, such locks are said to be bound to an individual, not by key, but by recognition, a kind of agreement between object and keeper. If that is true, the question is not why it opens for you, but how it knew you long before you ever touched it. You find it tucked away in an attic corner, the kind of chest built to endure, iron hinges, thick wood, a lock meant to keep out anyone without the key. The surface is scarred from years of use, the metal dulled with age. You expect it to resist you, to stay stubbornly shut. But when your hand rests on the lid, The lock clicks open. No key, no effort, just a sound that suggests it's been waiting. Inside are ordinary things: folded fabric, a stack of letters, perhaps tools or trinkets. None of them seem connected to you, yet the air carries a faint familiarity, as if the chest has been opened by your hands before. Locks have always been symbols of control, keeping things in, keeping people out. Mechanically, they can be bypassed, worn down, or opened with tools. Yet there are stranger accounts, passed quietly between collectors and archivists, of locks that recognize a person. In these stories, the mechanism yields instantly, as though responding to presence rather than pressure. Skeptics point to magnetic catches, degraded tumblers, or concealed latches mistaken for magic. But another view imagines the chest as belonging to more than one version of reality, one in which you did have the key and opened it often. If the boundary between those versions blurs, perhaps the lock remembers you from there. You close the chest, trying again, and each time it yields with the same easy click. Whether it's recognition or coincidence, you can't shake the sense that the lock doesn't just allow you in, it expects you. It begins with a small doubt. You glance at your compass, and the needle rests where it should, pointing north. But minutes later, it shifts, aligning in a different direction entirely. Each time you check, the needle spins to a new heading, sometimes slowly, sometimes with a quick, decisive snap. It never wavers in place. It always points somewhere with intent, though those places cannot all be north. You test it against maps, landmarks, even another compass, yet this one remains loyal only to its own unseen geometry. Navigation tools have been trusted for centuries, their reliability shaping trade routes, exploration, and survival itself. Yet there are recorded cases tucked away in maritime logs of compasses behaving this way, spinning, then settling on a heading that led ships to uncharted waters or toward islands that were not supposed to exist. Folklore often attributed such behavior to wandering poles or to places where the Earth's magnetism was thought to fold in on itself, creating pockets where direction became relative. Science offers explanations: metallic interference, magnetic anomalies, even subtle mechanical faults. But the precision here is unsettling. The compass is never random, never indecisive. It is as if it knows exactly where it wants you to go, and it's only your map that insists it is wrong. Over time, you notice patterns. Certain headings repeat, drawing your gaze toward distant ridgelines, closed-off streets, or stretches of open sea. Whether these destinations hold anything or nothing at all, you cannot yet tell. What you do know is that the compass is not lost. It simply belongs to a different world's north, and each spin is an invitation to follow. It looks like any other violin: varnished wood, graceful curves, strings wound in careful tension. The first time you draw the bow, the tone is warm and familiar. But as the note holds, you hear something beneath it, a second melody, faint but distinct, weaving through the first. You change your fingering, yet both lines of music shift together, each in a different key, each perfectly in time. One is bright and lilting, the other low and mournful, as though two players are hidden inside the same instrument. You test the strings one by one, dampen them, even pluck them slowly. Alone, each string sounds as it should. Yet when the bow moves, the phantom song returns, inseparable from your own. In folklore, such an instrument is called a twin-voiced relic, said to carry the music of its previous owner, or, in stranger versions, its counterpart from another world. Some stories tell of soldiers playing in camp only to hear a ghostly refrain no one else could explain, or of traveling musicians whose second song foretold events before they happened. Acoustics experts might talk about sympathetic resonance, hidden craftsmanship, or harmonic artifacts, but these theories stumble when the second melody stays consistent regardless of room, player, or bow, as if fixed in the wood itself. A few rare reports describe recognizing the second song later, overheard on a street corner, or in an old recording from a country they've never visited. You could keep playing, trying to master both at once, or set it aside and let it sleep. But the sense lingers that you are never truly playing alone, that somewhere, someone else is still drawing the bow with you. Clouds are wanderers by nature, shaped, stretched, and scattered by shifting air currents. Even the heaviest thunderheads drift eventually, but this one does not. A single, pale mass hangs over the same patch of sky for days. The wind bends trees beneath it, pushes other clouds along their routes, yet this one remains fixed, unmoved, as if anchored to something unseen. Meteorology offers some answers. Lenticular clouds can hover in place, formed by stable air flowing over mountains, their shapes renewed constantly, even as the moisture within them changes. But this is no mountain's cap. It hangs over flat land, where nothing should hold it still. Weather balloons and aerial flares can linger, but not for days, and certainly not without drifting or fading. Such anomalies appear in old weather logs, stationary vapors marked by sailors, shepherds, and pilots alike. Folklore often gives them other names: sky islands, watchful spirits, or waiting clouds that hide doorways to other realms. In some traditions, a cloud that refuses to move is an omen, holding back a storm until a specific event occurs. As the days pass, the cloud becomes part of the landscape, its unchanging outline visible from miles away. People stop pointing it out, but you still glance at it each time you step outside, noting its perfect stillness against the restless sky. And you wonder, when it finally leaves, will it drift away like any other cloud, or will it simply vanish, taking whatever it was guarding with it? It lands at your feet on an otherwise unremarkable afternoon, a single leaf, crisp and newly fallen. You stoop to pick it up, expecting nothing more than the familiar network of veins nature gives to all leaves. But as you turn it in your hand, the pattern begins to arrange itself into something far too deliberate. The central vein runs exactly where the main road through your hometown would be. Smaller veins branch at perfect angles, tracing side streets, alleys, and cul-de-sacs. Even the smallest marks match landmarks you know: the curve of the river, the rectangle of the park, the small circle where the fountain stands. Then you notice something more impossible: faint markings along the veins, not natural imperfections, but letters. Street names, everyone correct, in the same order they would appear on a printed map. You tell yourself it must be coincidence, the mind finding patterns where none exist. But the longer you look, the harder it is to deny. The map is not approximate, it is exact, down to details too small for memory alone. In local lore, there are tales of memory leaves, fallen from certain trees only once in a lifetime, carrying maps to places the finder must return to. Botanists dismiss such claims, pointing to the randomness of vein formation, but even they admit this much precision defies chance. You slip the leaf into a book for safekeeping, but each time you check it, new details seem to emerge, paths you don't recall, buildings that shouldn't be there. And with every change, you're left wondering, is the leaf showing the town as it is, or as it will be? It turns up in a box of forgotten media, an unmarked cassette, its label worn blank by time. Out of curiosity, you find an old player, press play, and hear the hiss of aged tape. Then comes your own voice. Not a recording you remember, not a phrase you've ever spoken, but sentences shaped exactly in your tone, your rhythm, your choice of words. At first, the voice seems to answer unspoken thoughts, casual, direct, as though responding to questions you haven't yet formed. You stop the tape, rewind, and play it again. The responses are the same each time, but the meaning shifts depending on what you were about to say, as if the recording anticipates the direction of your thoughts. Cassette anomalies have been reported before: ghost voices on blank tapes, accidental overdubs, strange feedback loops that seem almost conversational. Technically, sound can be imprinted accidentally through magnetic interference or partial erasure. Yet such errors don't explain the uncanny precision of hearing yourself answer what you haven't asked. Some suggest that magnetic tape, with its ability to capture layers of time and sound, might occasionally align with something beyond the moment of recording, pulling in fragments from a conversation that hasn't happened yet. Others imagine the voice not as a recording at all, but as a bridge, a point where you and another version of yourself briefly share the same signal. When the tape reaches its end, the player clicks softly. You sit for a while before pressing rewind, wondering if, this time, the voice will be waiting for you, or if it's only there when you're not prepared to hear it. It rests at the back of a drawer, thin and dark, the wood polished smooth by hands that are not yours. At first touch, it feels ordinary, balanced, cool, faintly scented with something like dried herbs. But as you hold it, the weight shifts. Slowly at first, then more distinctly, it grows lighter, as if whatever anchors it to your grip is slipping away. There's no change in shape or size, yet your palm begins to close around something almost weightless, like air holding the memory of an object. When you set it down, the weight returns instantly, solid and sure. Pick it up again, and the fading begins once more. In certain traditions, ceremonial wands were said to bind themselves to their owners, not by locks or marks, but by recognition. Passed into another's hand, they would become inert or change entirely, the bond unable to survive the transfer. Folklore from parts of Eastern Europe and South America tells of tools and instruments that remember their maker, reacting to strangers with reluctance as if holding on to the ghost of an original touch. Practical minds might call it a trick of perception, fatigue in the arm, the subtle shift of balance as your grip changes. But the sensation here is too deliberate, too consistent, like the wand is measuring you and deciding you are not the one it waits for. You can almost imagine that somewhere, its true owner still exists, perhaps reaching now for a drawer, wondering why their wand feels heavier than it should, as though a piece of it has wandered off to test another hand. It's barely noticeable at first, a pinprick in the plaster, small enough to pass for a nail hole. You might not have seen it at all if the light hadn't caught it just so. Leaning closer, you expect darkness on the other side, maybe insulation or the faint texture of old wood. Instead, there's movement, a subtle shift, the kind you recognize instantly, not random shadow, but something alive. Then you see it, an eye, perfectly still, perfectly centered, gazing straight at you. No blink, no flinch. The color might be brown or gray or something harder to name, but it holds the steady focus of something that is not startled to be discovered. You pull back, heart quickening, then lean in again, only to find the hole empty, the darkness complete. Folklore is littered with tales of watchers, spirits, fae, or strangers from hidden spaces who observe without crossing over. In older houses, tiny holes were sometimes left from spirit vents or concealed observation points in servant corridors, but these have long since been sealed. Modern logic might insist on pests, a trick of light, or an overactive imagination. Yet there are accounts from those who went further, marking the hole, photographing it, even sealing it over, only to find it reappear days later in a different wall at the same height. And in some versions, the details of the eye change each time, as if whatever is on the other side is not always the same watcher. You might leave it alone, pretending not to notice, but the memory remains, the quiet certainty that, for at least one moment, something on the other side was looking right back at you. Digital files are supposed to be static unless acted upon, typed into, edited, saved. Yet here, on your screen, is a document you recognize. It's one you wrote days ago, the text familiar. But as you read, a new sentence appears at the bottom. You didn't type it. Your hands are still. The cursor blinks patiently, then another line begins to form, letter by letter, in the same font and size as your own words. At first, it's tempting to blame a technical quirk. Networked documents can be edited by others with access, Syncing errors sometimes merge fragments from different versions, but you work alone on this file. No one else has the password. The sentences are in your language, yet not in your style. Some refer to events you haven't experienced. Others hint at things that haven't happened yet. Cybersecurity experts might suggest remote access, a keystroke logger, or malicious code. There are documented cases of pranksters hijacking shared files to insert strange messages. And yet, the precision here feels different. No typos, no formatting shifts, no signs of intrusion in the system logs. Just the quiet continuation of your document as though it were finishing itself. Writers have long spoken of stories that write themselves, moments when the words seem to arrive from somewhere outside the self. Folklore pushes this further. Objects, even tools, that carry their own intent, shaping work in ways the maker never chose. The cursor still blinks. Another sentence begins. You realize you're leaning forward, not to stop it, but to see what it will say next, and whether it will end with something meant only for you. It comes from a sealed packet, clean and new, the kind used in every first aid kit. You tear it open, expecting the sterile white of untouched gauze, but across its surface there are faint brown stains, not fresh, but long dried. They form no random blotches. Instead, they seem deliberate in their arrangement, tiny marks and flecks positioned with uncanny precision. You recognize them not as abstract shapes, but as constellations, ones visible only in the southern hemisphere, some you have never seen in person. You check the packaging, wondering if it's been tampered with, but the seal was intact. The manufacturer's mark is genuine, and yet, here is the blood, older than the fabric it rests on should allow. Astronomers might tell you that patterns of stars can be imagined anywhere, that human eyes seek meaning in coincidence. But here, the constellations match exactly, star for star, spacing and angle perfect as if traced from a chart. In maritime legends, there are whispers of sailor's cloth, bandages said to carry the sky maps of faraway voyages, a guide for navigation, or a sign of where a wound was destined to be taken. Folklore warns that such patterns are omens, telling of journeys still to come. You keep the bandage, unsure whether to use it or hide it. Sometimes you take it out just to trace the shapes, and each time you do, you feel a quiet pull toward places far south of where you stand, as though the blood itself remembers where under those stars it was first spilled. It happens in the stillness between sounds. The guitar rests where you left it, leaning against a chair, its strings slack from age and disuse. Then, without a hand near it, one string begins to hum. A low, deliberate vibration you can both hear and feel in the air. The note is not part of any song you know, and it lingers longer than seems natural, as though it's being sustained by something unseen. You watch closely. The string moves again, not with the erratic quiver of a stray breeze, but in a measured rhythm, plucking out tones that build into a pattern. It's not quite a melody you can name, yet it feels purposeful, like the echo of music from somewhere else. Physics offers familiar explanations. A passing truck might send vibrations through the floorboards. Air currents, temperature changes, or sympathetic resonance from distant sounds could set the string in motion. These causes are plausible, until the notes form sequences too precise for chance or repeat themselves exactly on different days. Musical folklore has its share of such accounts. Lutes in empty rooms, violins sighing under moonlight, strings that remember the songs most often played on them. A stranger possibility is that the guitar is resonating with a sound not audible to you, only to itself. One coming from another place or time, where the player's hands are still on it. When the string falls silent, the air feels oddly heavier, as though the last note hasn't quite faded. And later, when you pass the guitar again, you can't help listening, half expecting it to resume the tune, and half hoping you'll recognize it when it does. It sits where you left it, a small porcelain doll, its painted eyes fixed ahead, hands resting neatly in its lap. You glance away for only a moment, and when your gaze returns, the head is turned. Not by much, just enough for it to meet your eyes directly. The shift is subtle enough to doubt at first, the kind of thing you might blame on memory. But as the day passes, it happens again. A change in the angle of the head, the tilt of a shoulder, the faint repositioning of the legs. Each time, the movement is small, deliberate, and always toward you. Throughout history, dolls have carried a strange duality, treasured keepsakes on one hand, uncanny stand-ins for people on the other. In some cultures, they were made as protective charms, given faces so that spirits could recognize and guard the household. In others, they served as vessels in ritual, believed capable of holding intention, luck, or even fragments of a soul. Old letters from the 19th century describe figurines in nurseries that seemed to change their posture over time, though the observations were often dismissed as the tricks of an overactive imagination. The rational mind turns to small explanations: a shift from vibration, a draft moving a loosely attached joint, the way shadows alter our perception of angles. Yet the precision here, the deliberate turning toward you, resists such comfort. It is not random, and it never turns away. The doll seems less like an object being moved, and more like something observing, adjusting itself to keep you in sight. And though you tell yourself it is only porcelain and paint, you still find it harder each day to walk past without looking back, just to see if it moves again when you're not watching. It begins as a quick glance at your phone, checking the route home, confirming your location. But instead of the familiar streets around you, the GPS shows a pulsing pin far from land, deep in the open ocean. No islands nearby, no shipping routes, nothing but blue. The coordinates are precise, down to the decimal, yet mean nothing to you. You refresh the app, switch devices, even check other mapping services. The result is the same. You are, according to every satellite, floating miles from shore. Sometimes the map shows a faint outline at the spot, an unnamed shape, erased the moment you zoom in. And always, the pin sits at its center, waiting. Mariners' folklore speaks of phantom positions, coordinates that lure ships into strange waters, where compasses spin and currents reverse. Some old charts mark them with warnings or tiny symbols: a skull, a star, a single dot with no explanation. Modern engineers might point to GPS drift, satellite error, or data corruption, yet these seldom account for the detail. In a few rare reports, those who travel toward the coordinates, physically or virtually, find the pin moves ahead, as if it does not want to be reached. There are stranger accounts still. People who have tapped the pin to see an address, only to have their own name appear. Others have found a timestamp set days or weeks in the future. Whether it's a glitch, a trap, or a place that exists only for you, the pin stays fixed on the map, marking a spot in waters you may never touch, but that somehow knows exactly where you are. A couch is supposed to hold you, its cushions compressing just enough to be comfortable, the frame solid beneath. But this one feels wrong. The moment you sit, you sink far deeper than the material should allow. It's not the sag of old springs or worn padding. It's as if the gravity beneath this one spot is heavier, pulling you down inch by inch. Your body shifts to adjust, yet the seat keeps drawing you lower, as though there's more space beneath you than the couch could possibly contain. Practical explanations come first. Furniture can weaken over time, supports cracking invisibly until they give under weight. Some couches conceal storage compartments, and a broken hinge could cause an uneven collapse. But here, there's no creak, no tearing fabric, just an impossible depth, as though you're sitting into something far larger than the couch itself. Reports of similar sensations appear in both folklore and paranormal case studies. Soft spots in furniture, beds, or even floors where people claim to sink further than the dimensions allow. In old maritime stories, chairs aboard ships were said to pull men down into the ocean without moving at all, a superstition blamed on cursed timbers. You stand, half expecting the couch to return to normal height, but the cushions sit as they always have, undisturbed. The next time you pass it, you hesitate, because the strangest part wasn't the sinking itself. It was the faint, pressing feeling that if you hadn't stood up, you might still be falling. It sits in an ordinary cup, steaming gently, its surface calm. You lift it to your lips, expecting a single, familiar flavor. The first sip is unmistakably tea, warm, tannic, faintly floral. You set the cup down, puzzled at nothing in particular, until the second sip comes. Now it is coffee, rich, bitter, with the depth of beans freshly ground. You swirl the liquid, sniff it, even glance inside, but the color is the same, somewhere between the two, yet fully neither. Sip by sip, it shifts. Sometimes tea returns, sometimes coffee, and sometimes a strange in-between taste, as though the two are layered and your mouth brushes against one at a time. No sugar changes it, no stirring blends it, no cooling alters the pattern. Chemists might suggest cross-contamination, remnants from another drink, or a chemical trick of perception. But that does not explain the consistency. Tea on one sip, coffee on the next, repeating without fail. Folklore offers other answers. Stories of dual cups that serve the drink the drinker most longs for, or vessels that remember their past contents and let them bleed into the present. When you finish, the flavor is gone from your mouth, but not from your thoughts. You pour again, hoping to catch which taste will appear first. Yet a quiet part of you wonders whether the cup is deciding, sip by sip, which version of the drink you should have. It comes without warning, a rising wail, distant at first, then swelling until it feels as though the air itself is vibrating. You look up, expecting clouds, aircraft, something to match the urgency of the sound. But the sky is a perfect, unbroken blue. The noise grows until it fills everything, a pressure in your chest as much as in your ears. And then, just as suddenly, it stops. Not a fade, not a gradual dying away. One moment it's there, the next it's gone, leaving the stillness sharper than before. No one else nearby seems alarmed. Some glance upward, puzzled. Others continue as though nothing happened. There are precedents in history for unexplained atmospheric sounds, mystery booms, sky trumpets, harmonic droning that carries for miles. Most have rational candidates. Temperature inversions bending sound, distant industrial alarms, even echoes from far-off storms. But those explanations falter when the sound is heard directly overhead, in a sky empty of both clouds and cause. Folklore sometimes frames such moments as warnings, echoes of past disasters, or faint bleed-through from events in other timelines, where the siren was real and the danger imminent. In that version, perhaps the sky was not clear, and the sound did not stop. You scan the horizon, half expecting the wail to rise again. When it doesn't, you're left with the peculiar unease of a warning whose meaning you can't decipher, an alarm that might not have been meant for you, yet reached you all the same.